You can't follow my orders. You useless middle school graduate. The one yelling at me was the second generation CEO. He had studied business at Tokyo University, and he always looked down on me, a mere middle school graduate. But Mr. Gates, this contract is not in the client's best interest. Oh, you're talking back to a Tokyo University graduate like me? I'm the CEO, and you're just an employee. Do you understand who's in charge here? In charge. Does going to Tokyo University really make you that superior? I glared at Mr. Gates with frustration. It seemed like he didn't like that. Mr. Gates said something I could hardly believe. What's with that rebellious look? That's it. There are plenty of people who can replace you. If you can't follow orders, you're fired. What? Oh, and let's make it a voluntary resignation, shall we? I'm not wasting another dime on a nobody like you. Mr. Gates said this, laughing loudly as he left me standing there in shock. However, little did I know that this same Mr. Gates would be begging for my forgiveness on his knees, crying, just a few days later. Let me tell you the story of how I turned things around. I'm Stanley. Some might say I don't have any special skills, and maybe that's true. There were even times when I hated myself for it. Back in school, my grades were always average. I wasn't much of an athlete either. Even though I wasn't particularly outgoing, I had a few friends who stuck by me. We'd often bring our card decks and play the popular card games of the time. My parents were fishermen who worked as a team. They would head out to sea early in the morning, and by the time I came home from school, they were always back. I wonder what kind of fish we'll have for dinner today. I thought as I came home one day, but my parents weren't there. Maybe they went shopping? But it was odd that neither of them was home. The unusually quiet house started to make me uneasy. That day, my parents never returned. The peaceful days I had known vanished without a sound. I was taken in by my maternal grandparents, and as we left town, we passed by the harbor. The boat that should have been there was gone, still lost somewhere at sea, and my parents too. A few days later, the boat was towed back, but my parents were nowhere to be found. The sudden loss left me numb, unable to even cry, as I struggled to process the reality of it all. I moved in with my grandparents, leaving my hometown behind. When I transferred to my new school, I was surrounded by unfamiliar faces. At first, people were curious and asked me a lot of questions, but once they realized I was just an ordinary guy, they gradually started drifting away. I wished I could play cards with them like I used to, but the game I knew wasn't popular there. No one had those cards. Instead, a different card game was all the rage. I asked my grandparents that I wanted them to buy the new card game, but they frowned, looking concerned. In hindsight, it was obvious why. With the cost of my future education and upbringing on their minds, spending money on something like that wasn't practical. I couldn't push any further. I stopped going out on weekends and just stayed home, so maybe feeling sorry for me, my grandpa, James, invited me to go for a walk one day. Honestly, I wasn't at an age where walking around sounded fun, and I doubted he was taking me anywhere exciting. But I was bored enough to go along. After walking for about 15 minutes, we stopped in front of an old, unimpressive building. Olsen Go Club. The sign looked old-fashioned, with faded colors and an outdated font. Who would even come to a place like this? I glanced at my grandpa, thinking it couldn't be, but he was already opening the door. Oh my, James. We were starting to worry since we hadn't seen you around lately. Well, a lot's been going on. This is my grandson, Stanley. Is it okay if he joins us? Of course. Come right in. I bowed, took off my shoes, and stepped into the main room. There were about 6 go boards set up, with people facing off across from each other, deep in their games. I was guided to an empty seat, and Grandpa sat down across from me. I didn't get what was so fun about this dull-looking game. While I thought that, Grandpa eagerly began explaining the rules. It wasn't too complicated. I felt like I could probably beat some of the others here. All right, Stanley, why don't we give it a try? Sure. I could place my stones wherever I liked. I began placing them, thinking strategically about surrounding my opponent. It seemed easy, at least until the mid-game. Slowly, I started running out of good spots to place my stones, yet I kept thinking hard before making each move. And then, Grandpa placed a stone. Oh, wait. That spot. I was just about to place my stone there. Before I knew it, I was completely absorbed in the game. By the time I noticed, there were a few older men I didn't know standing around, watching us. When we finally finished placing all the stones, I gathered the pieces on my side and counted them. I had lost by just a few points. Oh wow, to lose by such a small margin against James. Well done, kid. How long have you been playing? Today was my first time. Your first time? Impressive. No, not really. I lost, after all. Still, that was a great effort. Even with the compliments, I couldn't shake off the frustration. I had underestimated this game. It looked so simple. To be honest, I didn't expect to lose to an old person. He's my grandson. We're living together now. That day, I was treated like a little celebrity. Some folks even gave me snacks and drinks, calling me Stan and cheering me on. That's how I ended up hooked on Go. At first, I just looked forward to the weekends when Grandpa would take me. But eventually, I started going by myself after school. I became a regular at the Go Club at a young age. As I played against others, I realized that Grandpa had been going easy on me. It turned out he was pretty skilled at Go. Even the other members were strong, often challenging me with just the right amount of leniency. I lost more often than I won, but the games were always fun and engaging, and I'd occasionally manage a victory. I couldn't wait to go to the Go Club every day. It was one afternoon after school. As usual, I left school, planning to go to the Go Club. All right, today I'm going to show everyone what I've got. One day, I'll even beat Grandpa. With that thought, I confidently stepped through the school gate, only to realize I had forgotten something. On my way back to the classroom, I passed by a girl. I think her name was Hailey. She's quiet, unremarkable, and doesn't really stand out. I'd never seen her hanging out with anyone either. Oh well. I grabbed what I had forgotten and hurried out of the school. When I got outside, there was Hailey walking ahead of me. She looked lonely. Come to think of it, I used to feel that way too. But now I've got the Go Club, so I'm fine. Still, I felt a little sorry for her. Mustering up some courage, I called out to her. Hey. Hailey turned around, startled. What? Well, I'm heading out to hang out. Do you want to come with me? Hang out? What do you do? There's this place I always go to. It's fun, I promise. Okay, but only for a little while. I took her to the Go Club. When we arrived in front of the club, she looked puzzled. Wait, here. Oh, right. I felt the same way the first time I came here. Yep, this is it. Hello? I cheerfully opened the door and greeted everyone. Oh, Stan. We've been waiting for you. And who's your friend? This is Hailey, from my class. Can we use that board? Of course, go ahead. I sat her down across from me and carefully explained the rules. So I can place the stones anywhere? That's right. Let's give it a try. We both started placing our stones. Before long, a small crowd had gathered around us. She seemed focused, carefully studying the board. We finished placing all the stones. Honestly, I didn't expect her to be this good. In the end, I lost by a narrow margin. Wow, beating Stan on your first try. How long have you been playing? Actually, this is my first time. First time? That's amazing. Stanley, you went easy on me, didn't you? I didn't go easy on her. I gave it everything I had. Darn it. I thought I was going to win. Everyone, including Hailey, laughed as I dramatically expressed my frustration. After that, she started coming to the Go Club about twice a week. Apparently, Hailey had tutoring or cram school sessions, so unlike me, she couldn't come to the Go Club every day. Even after I became a middle schooler, my trips to the Go Club didn't stop, and by then, I was playing seriously against everyone. I began to give the seasoned old men a hard time during matches. The first time I beat Grandpa, the entire Go Club celebrated with me. One of the elderly members even ordered sushi delivery, and we toasted with juice and beer. It's a memory I cherish. I wanted to play Go more seriously. At some point, that desire led me, with everyone's encouragement, to aim to become a professional Go player. Those were such happy days, but that dream was cut short. It happened in the winter of my sophomore year of high school. It was a cold morning, the crisp winter air biting at my skin. My grandpa collapsed and was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. But he never made it. Grandma stayed strong. He lived a long life. I'm sure he had so much fun playing Go with you, Stanley. Surrounded by friends. He passed away with such a peaceful expression. She said that at the funeral, but despite her words, it looked like she was holding back tears. Grandma never showed her sadness in front of me, but losing Grandpa must have taken a toll on her because soon after, she also fell ill. She had taken care of me all this time. I was the only one who could care for her now. I couldn't afford to keep chasing the dream of becoming a professional Go player. I was fortunate enough to attend high school, but I knew I had to quit and start earning money. I dropped out of high school and began looking for work. The company that hired me was one that my grandparents' acquaintances ran. James helped me a lot back in the day. Come work for us. Mr. Gates, whom I had seen a few times at the Go Club, was the president of the company. It was a wholesale business dealing mainly in household goods and various other items. The employees were kind to me. You're pretty mature for your age. You're polite, and it's pleasant talking to you. You're serious and good with people. I was initially doing office work, like checking documents, but because of those compliments, I was transferred to sales. At first, Mr. Gates told me that sales would be too demanding and to stick with office work, but after hearing everyone's thoughts, he encouraged me to give it a try. I was taken around to meet various clients, gradually learning the ropes. So, you're the new guy? You seem pretty composed for someone so young. Yes, thank you. I look forward to working with you. Same here, let's keep in touch. The clients were all kind and said good things about me. You've brought in a good hire. I feel confident leaving things in your hands. They said that, and some clients even expanded the range of products they carried in their stores because of me. I felt fortunate. Even though I had no real skills, everyone was so supportive just because I worked hard. Determined to meet their expectations, I threw myself into my work. No matter how small the task, I would rush over if asked. Even for things that could be handled over the phone. I preferred to meet face to face to ensure everything was clear. Because of that attitude, I was invited to accompany a sales call to a potential client. There was one company we had been trying to secure a deal with for some time, but we hadn't managed to close the deal. It was a big account, and changing suppliers would be a significant adjustment for them. The cost of our products was slightly higher, but the quality was significantly better. The client's company president, Mr. Owens, was aware of that. I was taught that by my senior, Katherine. We waited in the meeting room at the client's office for a few minutes. "Sorry to keep you waiting," said Mr. Owens as he walked in, and when I saw him, I was stunned. "Simon." "Ha?" "Stan, no, wait, it's you, Stanley." To my surprise, it was Simon, Hailey's father. He was also a strong Go player. Whenever we bumped into each other at the Go Club, we usually only talked about Go. I had heard he was a company president, but I never imagined he was the CEO of Lilacs, the major company we were trying to secure a deal with. "Have you been playing lately? I haven't seen you around." "Yeah, I'd love to play again soon." For a while, Simon and I got caught up in talking about Go, completely forgetting about Katherine. Realizing we had been ignoring Katherine, Mr. Owens and I snapped back to business. Sorry about that. We're here to talk business, aren't we? It seemed like both of us tended to get carried away when it came to Go. I've been considering it for a while, but Mr. Owens hesitated over Katherine's negotiation proposal. So, I decided to take a bold step. "Katherine, how about we ask them to carry both products side by side? And, for the time being, our company could cover the cost difference." Even Katherine seemed unsure about it. "Mr. Owens, I think it's most important that your customers are happy. Even if it's 10 cents more expensive, quality matters. It's possible some of your customers are going to other stores because of it. I'm confident our product will make them happy. Well, it's true the quality is better. But adding new stock to the shelves is a hassle. In that case, Katherine and I can help. We'll personally deliver the stock to each store and make sure it's displayed without disrupting other products." Katherine looked at me, surprised. "Wait, what? Let's test it out for a while, see how sales and customer feedback go. If it doesn't work, we'll pull the products out. Please, give us a chance." All right, I'll give it a shot. Thank you." "Katherine, now we just need to head back and convince Mr. Gates. Our job is to get him on board with this." "Yeah, let's do it. And if we get in trouble, I'll take the blame." "I'll convince Mr. Gates, so please give us a bit more time." Ha. With that much determination, I'll have high hopes for you. I always thought you played Go with spirit. And it seems you're just as lively in business." "Thank you." "Well then, we'll be in touch. And next time we meet at the Go Club, I'd love to play a game." "Yes, absolutely." Katherine and I hurried back to Mr. Gates to discuss the proposal. After some consideration, Mr. Gates agreed that if this deal could go through, there might be more benefits for the company and gave us the go-ahead. Shortly after, we received a call from Mr. Owens. He decided to place an order for the product, saying we didn't need to cover any costs or handle the displays. He just wanted the contract signed. Karen and I were thrilled. This is all thanks to you, Stanley. I can't believe you managed to win over Mr. Owens like that. You really pulled it off. Even Mr. Gates was pleased. You've always had a way of making people like you, even from a young age. That's why everyone here, including me, is fond of you. I may never have had many friends in the past. But now, I'm surrounded by people who value me so much. It made me incredibly happy. Mr. Gates even gave me a promotion. I didn't really feel like I deserved the title of manager. I was still young, and I relied heavily on my seniors. Mr. Gates encouraged me to use my own judgment and be more decisive, but knowing how kind he was, I figured he was also showing me some compassion. He knew about my grandmother's situation, so I'm sure there was some leniency in his decision as well. Wanting to live up to his expectations, I threw myself into work even more. Our client base slowly expanded, and the company's performance steadily improved. It felt good to know that my efforts were helping everyone. In the midst of those days, there was an announcement that the president of the company would be stepping down. Apparently, Mr. Gates wasn't in the best of health. I had noticed him coughing occasionally, but now I heard he had collapsed. His son, Matthew, was going to take over as the second-generation president. Matthew had studied business management at Tokyo University. I wondered what kind of person he was. The whole company was gathered to hear his introductory speech. I will be taking over for my father as president. I studied business management to make this company bigger and stronger. From now on, we will operate according to my vision. He gave off a strict, no-nonsense vibe. Well, I decided to just focus on doing my best with what I could. That's what I kept telling myself. For about a month after the leadership change, nothing seemed different. But gradually Matthew started showing up at both the office and the sales floor. He watched everyone work with a stern expression. Honestly, it didn't feel good at all. One day, Matthew approached me. "You're young, aren't you?" "How old are you?" "I'm 29. Just a year younger than me." "Which college did you go to?" "Actually, I didn't go to college." "Oh, a high school graduate, then?" "Which high school?" "Well, I had to drop out of high school due to some personal reasons." "What?" Unbelievable. Someone in the position of manager hasn't even graduated from high school. Matthew put his hand to his forehead and shook his head. My father's decision-making was seriously flawed. What can you even do? Well, I've been working hard in sales. My only real skill is playing Go. Ah, so my father's Go connection, I see. He seemed to like you, but things will be different from now on. I'm the president now. So you'll follow my orders. Yes, I fully understand. I'll continue to do my best. Then bring back a signed contract with these terms. What Matthew handed me was a draft of a contract with ridiculous terms. It was a one-sided proposal, entirely focused on our company's profit. There's no way. I told you, didn't I? You'll follow my orders. This was insane. First of all, with terms like these, we couldn't compete with other companies, and there's no way the clients would be happy. I was given a week to secure the deal, but I was at a complete loss. It wasn't a matter of whether I could do it or not. I could probably beg and push for a few contracts. But that would ruin the trust I had built with our clients. It would hurt the very people I had worked so hard to connect with. I was torn. I knew I had a responsibility to the company. but I just couldn't recommend this contract. As I kept pushing it off, telling myself I'd figure it out tomorrow, the deadline crept closer. I hadn't even taken the draft out of my bag. "Hey, Stanley, you don't look so well. What's going on?" While delivering a quote for a new product at Lilacs, Mr. Owens expressed concern. "It's nothing, really. Come on, don't be so secretive. It looks like you're dealing with something tough. If you feel like it, I'm here to listen and help." I hesitated, but I realized hiding it now might make things worse. I pulled the documents from my bag and showed them to Mr. Owens. "This is..." "I see. You've been given a tough assignment. So that's the situation. All right. If signing this contract can help you out, Stanley, then I'm all in. You've always supplied us with great products." I felt my chest tighten. Without asking for any details, he was willing to agree to such an unfair contract without a second thought. I gently took the documents back from Mr. Owens and returned them to my bag. "No, please forget about this. This is an internal company matter, and I can't burden you with something like this. I'll handle it myself." "I see. You know, this reminds me of the first time you came here. You said something similar back then. How you were going to talk directly with Mr. Gates. I was impressed by your determination. In a world obsessed with profit, I couldn't believe there was such an earnest young person like you. Stanley, keep at it. I'm rooting for you. Thank you." Mr. Owens's words gave me the strength I needed. That's right. I have people who believe in and support me. There's nothing to hesitate about. Securing this kind of contract would be wrong. I walked back to the office with my head held high. I'm back. Just my luck, Matthew was there as well. "Well, from the look on your face, I assume you've secured that contract?" "No, I wasn't able to get a single deal with that contract. However, Mr. Owens placed an order using this estimate instead." I handed Matthew the first order form that Mr. Owens had filled out earlier. "Ha! What are you thinking? Your job is to sweet-talk the old man and squeeze money out of him. You take what you can get." "I can't. I just can't do that." "Can't do it? You're a middle school graduate with no skills, and you can't even handle that? You can't even do the simple job of flattering the old man? It's a waste to send someone like you out on sales calls. Starting tomorrow, you're off the field. Stay in the office. I'll have you running errands for me instead. But what about the handover of my clients? Don't talk back." Tokyo University graduate versus middle school graduate, CEO versus employee. Do you know who's superior here? You're replaceable. I'll work with those who can produce results. It's called meritocracy. Salespeople who can't bring in money are just a waste of resources. Got it? From that day on, I was ordered to be Matthew's assistant. My new tasks were nothing but menial chores. I was sent to run petty errands, like waiting in line for popular lunch spots. Of course, I never got to enjoy any of the food. Whenever Matthew had a meeting, I was told to carry the necessary documents and follow him. While I carried the paperwork, Matthew would stroll with his hands in his pockets. When we arrived at the meeting room, he'd snatch the documents from me and order me to wait outside until the meeting was over. This became my daily routine. It felt like living in hell. So, are you starting to understand now? Understand what? You still don't get it? Fine, I'll give you a simple question. What is a customer? What do you mean? A customer is someone important to us, someone we value. Wrong. Want a hint? This is business. Got it? Someone I've connected with through work, someone who's important. Wrong again. How dense can you be? It's about money. What else could it be? In the end, it's all about money. I was shocked. Sure, money is important. But money isn't everything. We're not living in a world where people are starving. It's a society where we support each other in times of need, where we can live peacefully together. I disagree. I don't want to work like that. I can't support that kind of thinking. You're naive. Ever heard of survival of the fittest? In the end, the strong prevail. And those who can make money are the strong ones. If you can't even understand that, then get out of here. There's no place for someone like you in this company. You're just a useless hire brought in by my father's connections. Oh, and of course, you'll be resigning voluntarily, right? We're not wasting another cent on a deadweight like you. I thought about my grandmother's hospital bills, the money I needed to earn. But I couldn't take it anymore. I don't need the money. I'm done with this company. As I said those words, tears unexpectedly welled up in my eyes. I thought of Mr. Gates, who hired me despite dropping out of high school. I thought of my kind seniors, the clients who had treated me warmly, sometimes even offering advice. All of their faces flashed through my mind, and I could no longer even see Matthew standing in front of me. You put on a brave front, and now you're bawling like a baby? How pathetic. Get out of here, will you? Shoo, shoo. I turned around, ignoring the concerned looks of my coworkers, and rushed out of the company. I headed straight to the hospital where my grandmother was staying. I washed my face in the restroom, hiding the traces of my tears. Then, I headed toward my grandmother's hospital room. When I opened the door, I saw that she looked a little better. You seem to be doing well today. Oh my, weren't you working today? Yeah, but not anymore. I sat down next to her. Actually, I quit my job today. It was a good company, the one you introduced me to. I'm sorry. My grandmother gave me a far-off look, as if she could see right through me, and then spoke slowly. No, I'm the one who's sorry, Stanley. I've made you endure so much. I couldn't do anything for you, and on top of that, I made you carry all these burdens. That's not true. You raised me through such difficult times and even helped me find a job. I've always been grateful for that, and I still am. Stanley, live the life you want. Do what makes you happy. That's what would make me the happiest. Your grandpa used to say that too, you know. He'd always say, "We've made Stanley hold back for so long, so I hope he can live doing what he loves in the future." Sometimes, you need to forget about work and just do what you enjoy. If you don't, you'll end up like me before you know it. She said this with a playful tone. Ha ha, you're right. We only get one life. What makes me happy, huh? I've been so focused on work all this time. I have some savings, so I won't be in trouble right away. What do I really want to do? Thank you. I feel better now. I think I'll go out for a bit. I left the hospital and began walking. As I walked along the familiar path, it gradually turned into a road filled with memories. I don't usually take this route, but it's one I used to walk often in the past. Not far after passing the elementary school, I reached the old Go Club. The Go Club that had always seemed a bit old-fashioned even back then. There is no way that the appearance has been renewed, so it hasn't changed one bit. I opened the door to the Go Club for the first time in years. Welcome. Oh, is that Stan? It's been a while. Come on in. Long time no see. Excuse me for dropping by. Hey everyone, Stan's here. Hearing that, the familiar faces of the older men gathered around me. What have you been up to? How have you been? They pulled me over to the Go board, eager for a game. Well then, I'll play first. I'm probably the best one here right now. Then I'll go next. You're not leaving early today, Stan. One of the men handed me a juice, smiling as he always had. They still treated me like a kid. I thanked him, took the juice, and drank a sip. Ah, I'm home. That's what it tasted like. The slight sourness might have been from my own tears. I wiped my eyes with my handkerchief, faced my opponent, and picked up a stone. I placed the stone on the board. The repetitive action of playing Go brought some peace to my mind. It seemed like I hadn't lost my touch. Playing steadily, I won 2 games in a row. Well, if it isn't Stan. How about a match? It was Mr. Owens. He had just arrived and was loosening his tie, stuffing it into his pocket. Let's play. It had been a while since we faced each other. Mr. Owens was a tough opponent. I was struggling to keep up with him. What's going on, Stan? You're usually so free and bold in your moves, but now you're playing so timidly. The sharp sound of his stone hitting the board made me gasp. Ah. That spot. The board looked familiar. Of course. It was the same pattern from when I beat my grandfather for the first time. But this time, I was in my grandfather's position. If I keep playing like this, I had no choice but to place a stone in a painful spot. Here. What's the matter? You look awfully down as you play. Another stone hit the board with a sharp sound. Droplets began to fall onto the board. They were coming from my face. I couldn't stop the tears from streaming down as I continued to place my stones. What's wrong? Am I wrong? I confessed everything to Mr. Owens about how I was fired from the company. I felt guilty for burdening the people who had come here to enjoy Go with such a dark story. But I couldn't hold it in any longer. I see. So that's what happened. Don't worry, Stan. Leave it to me. I have an idea. The next day, I got a call from Matthew. Stanley, I think it's time to end your little break. Can you come back to the company and get back to sales? His voice was sickeningly sweet. I told you I quit. You also told me to resign, remember? That was just a figure of speech. I've always known you were skilled, so I thought maybe it was time for you to try a different approach. Regardless, I can no longer follow the company's direction. I already said, I'm done. Don't say that. Please, help me. Several companies, not just 1 or 2, are refusing to do business unless you're involved. Even the biggest client. We're in serious trouble without you. You understand, right? This time, his voice was filled with desperation. No, I'm not coming back. I'll submit my resignation letter soon. What? After all I'm asking for? What did you do behind my back? This is so unfair. You must have pulled some shady deal, right? Did you bribe them? Sell our information to a competitor? I was astonished. How could he change his tone so easily? Goodbye. I'm busy. Tired of it all, I hung up the phone. Right now, I just wanted to focus on playing Go. I had fully regained my form. I played exactly how I wanted and won with ease. It was win after win. Everyone I had met so far wanted to play Go with me. If I were to take on all of them, it would take days. It was getting dark outside, and I figured this would be my last game for today. I bowed to my opponent across the board. Just as I was about to place my stone, the door burst open with a bang. I heard the shop owner try to stop someone, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. I turned around, and it was Matthew. I finally found you, he said, dropping to his knees. Please, I beg you. Come back to the company. I'm begging you. He lowered his head until it touched the floor. I'm not coming back. Please. I'll get the money, I'll give you a promotion, whatever you want. Without you, the company is finished. I'm begging you. A voice rose from the back of the room. Isn't this a bit rude? It was a beautiful voice, one that didn't quite match the worn-down Go Club. Standing tall, with her hair elegantly framing her forehead, was a striking woman. Matthew looked up in surprise. And you are? I'm Mr. Owens's daughter from Lilacs. Then what? Oh, thank heavens. Please, you must ask your father to resume business with us. I beg you. One of our employees left without handing over any of his clients, and I promise we'll offer something in return. Matthew bowed his head again. But it was a wasted effort. She had been there the day I broke down in tears in front of Mr. Owens. Come to think of it, she was the first and only person I ever brought to this Go Club. We had played Go together many times, and now her father was a regular at the club. When Mr. Owens first came to see what kind of place his daughter was visiting, he found a humble Go Club. Turns out, Mr. Owens loved Go as well, and I'd ended up playing more games with him than with Hailey. It was thanks to her that I connected with Mr. Owens. He often brought people to the club to play against me. As I racked up wins, he even suggested I consider becoming a professional. Word about me spread, and people began to gather at the club through his introduction. I never lacked opponents. Then, when my grandfather fell ill, I stopped coming for a while. Once things settled with my grandfather, I resumed visiting the club weekly. Hailey would sometimes come, and we'd play together. She was always polite and reserved. It was hard to believe that the quiet girl I knew had now stepped into the conversation so forcefully. But this was more than just stepping in. Matthew, is it? I've heard good things about your father, but it seems the second generation is much better at lying. That's not true. I'm not lying. Please, you say something too. I sighed. What is there to say? You never had any credibility with me. I can't possibly return. Exactly. How could you treat Stanley so badly? Hailey raised her voice. He's so smart, kind-hearted, and trustworthy. You'll never find anyone like him. All you care about is money. How could you expect me to send Stanley back to someone like you? Send him back. He's just unemployed. Come on, Stanley, without a job, you'll need money, right? I'll improve your position, too. Oh. And your grandmother is in the hospital, isn't she? I'll cover all the medical costs. How about that? No, I'm not unemployed. I'm currently working at Lilacs. Mr. Owens had gratefully extended a job offer to me, and it came with excellent conditions. I was offered a 3-day work week. Mr. Owens suggested that I spend the rest of my time playing Go and consider pursuing a professional career. I hesitated. Was it okay to accept such generosity? I've grown into a responsible adult now. I'm no longer the child who depended on my grandparents for everything. Live the way you want. Your grandpa and I would be happiest if you did. I recalled my grandmother saying that in the hospital. Grandma, I want to play Go. I want to chase the dream I once gave up on. So, I accepted Mr. Owens's generous offer. If you go pro, make sure to put our company down as a sponsor, okay? But if you ever feel like working more, that's fine too. I know it was tough back then, but this time, I'll be here to support you. So go all out and give it your best shot. Mr. Owens went as far as to say that to me. Those weren't just empty, shallow words. They were heartfelt, filled with genuine emotion. A few months later, in the end, Matthew drove the company into bankruptcy. He had lost all the employees and clients who might have supported him, and the company quietly folded without even making the rumor mill. Rumor had it that Matthew, lacking any support or connections, was now burdened with debt and scraping by on daily labor jobs. It was a cruel irony for someone who had studied business management at Tokyo University. On the 3 days I wasn't playing Go, I went out to handle sales. Thanks to my connections and referrals, I was able to bring in a decent number of contracts, despite only working a 3-day workweek. I didn't want to take advantage of the company's generosity. So, to make up for the reduced workdays, I worked extra hard in sales. As I expected, my instincts weren't wrong. Your previous achievements were outstanding, and it's all thanks to your character. You have such a pleasant way of communicating with people. I'm proud that I pushed for your hire. Mr. Owens was genuinely happy to have me on board. Though there was one other condition to the favorable offer. Hailey. I was to become her Go teacher. So, how's Hailey's skill? She seems to be doing quite well, don't you think? Yes, she has a straightforward and quiet playing style. If I get too caught up admiring it, she quickly gains the upper hand. It keeps me on edge. Is that so? What exactly are you admiring? No. I meant her playing style. Ha ha, I'm just joking. I'll leave her in your capable hands. Today, I would be playing a match against Hailey. I made my way over to her. We bowed to each other and the match began. And so, the game began. The soft clicks of the stones echoed with each move. I placed my stone where I thought it belonged. But then, on her next move, Hailey made a clear mistake. However, her fingers hadn't yet left the stone. She kept her slender, graceful fingers resting on it. Curious, I looked up to see her gazing at me intently. I felt my heart skip a beat and held my breath. It was as if time had stopped. Go ahead, it's your move. Oh, right, sorry about that. I glanced back at the board, but the stone Hailey had just placed was no longer there. She slid her fingers and placed the stone in a different spot. It was right next to my stone, which I had placed in the top right corner at the star point. She placed it perfectly at the Komoko point. This wasn't her usual move. But it was a good one. This game, it might be special. As I took an unusually long time to think, I realized she was still gazing intently at me. I had spent most of my life being helped by others. I used to think I had no special talents. That's what I believed. But now, I understand. Being good at academics, excelling in sports, or having money. Those are all great things, I suppose, but I believe there's something more important that I should value. Being trusted is important. And what can I do to earn that trust? How should I carry myself? When I think about it, the answer comes naturally from within me. Being genuinely honest and sincere, as if it's second nature. That's what it takes to honor the trust people place in you. Thanks to everyone, I've made it this far. And life is just beginning. If I ever get married in the future, I'd love to have the ceremony by the sea. Preferably somewhere with a view of the ocean from my hometown. Maybe, just maybe, my mom and dad will come to watch. Hey, poor guy, eat this and go home. Katherine's loud voice echoed through the reunion hall. With a creepy smile on her face, Katherine handed me a plate piled high with salt. Everyone around us looked shocked and couldn't hide their surprise as they stared at me. But soon enough, the entire room erupted in laughter. Still, Katherine's insults didn't stop. Hurry up and leave. We don't want to hang around someone as poor as you. She looked at me as if I were some kind of savage. I had braced myself for this before coming to the reunion, but I never thought it would be this bad. One of my close classmates tried to defend me, but I didn't want to ruin the reunion because of me. With that thought in mind, I quickly left the hall. Although I felt a bit frustrated for not saying anything back, I knew what Katherine said wasn't true. Plus, I believe people who go out of their way to hurt others don't have a bright future. So, I chose to stay silent. Katherine kept looking at me with disdain. None of us knew then about the shocking event that was to come. My name is Kevin Turner, and I'm 35 years old. Just an ordinary guy, no different from anyone else. Well, except for one thing. I don't have parents. By the time I was old enough to remember, both had passed away from illness. It was my grandparents who took me in. Most people think of grandparents as kind and generous, always spoiling you with treats, but mine were different. Especially my grandfather, who was as strict as a schoolteacher. Kevin, time to study. And after that, soccer practice. As soon as I got home from school, my grandfather would shout orders at me. No matter how much I protested, he never gave up and kept pushing me. As a child, I found him terrifying, and I couldn't stand him. But thanks to him, I started excelling in school. Kevin, you're amazing. Another perfect score on the test. Come on, everyone, let's give him a round of applause. My teacher would always praise me like that, but my classmates remained cold. Why should we clap for a poor kid without parents? I don't get it. Yeah. He's not even really one of us. He must have cheated or something. My classmates would completely ignore the teacher and say things like that. Though the teacher scolded them harshly, they refused to listen. I hadn't told anyone that I didn't have parents, but after seeing my grandparents at school events, my classmates must have figured it out. From that moment on, they looked down on me and treated me with contempt. I hated walking to and from school with them, so I started leaving the house earlier in the morning. But my classmates would wait for me on purpose just to hurl insults. Your family's poor, right? How do you get good grades when you can't even afford tutoring? You must be cheating. Cheating is wrong. I couldn't help but look down. No matter how much I tried to avoid them, my classmates always found a way to torment me, and I was truly fed up with it. But even if I wanted to talk to someone about it, I had no parents to confide in. I could have talked to my grandparents, but I didn't want to burden them with my problems. That life continued for a while, and I eventually got used to it. One chilly day in 6th grade, as I was walking to school, the group of classmates who always teased me suddenly appeared in front of me. Here we go again. I thought as I tried to walk past them, but they rushed toward me, yelling loudly, "Hey! Are you ignoring us? You've got some nerve, ignoring us when you're just a poor kid." "I'm not ignoring you. I just want to go to school," I replied. But their leader shouted at me for no reason. "Someone like you doesn't deserve to live." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Why did I have to endure such cruel words? I couldn't understand. Then, from behind me, I heard a familiar voice call out my name. Startled, I turned around to see my grandfather, his face red with anger. It seemed he had overheard everything. Unable to stay quiet, my grandfather unleashed his fury on the group of classmates. "Are you saying that without both parents, someone doesn't deserve to live? What nonsense!" I had never wanted my grandfather to find out I was being bullied. I knew this would happen if he did, and I didn't want to bother him with his already busy schedule. Hearing my grandfather's words, the group quickly scattered and disappeared. My grandfather then handed me the gym clothes I had forgotten at home. But what he said next completely surprised me. "I came to bring you your gym clothes, but I didn't expect to find this mess. How about we do something fun together today? Let's go." "What?" Shocked, I followed my grandfather. We had lived together for a long time, but it was the first time we skipped school to go out. He took me to the amusement park I had always wanted to visit. "Really?" I asked, barely containing my excitement, and my grandfather, with a big smile, said, "Nothing beats an amusement park to lift your spirits," as he ruffled my hair. It was my first time at an amusement park, and I had the time of my life. All my bad feelings melted away, and I felt deeply grateful to my grandfather. On the way home after a full day of fun, my grandfather said something that stayed with me. "Kevin, there are plenty of people who grow up without parents and lead wonderful lives. You've had to grow up in tough circumstances, but you deserve to be happy. There's no such thing as a person who doesn't have the right to live." His words resonated powerfully in my heart. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. I quickly wiped them away so he wouldn't notice. Grandfather always said that men don't cry, and I didn't want to get scolded. But this time, my grandfather gently pulled me into a hug. The warmth of that moment is something I remember vividly, even as an adult. From that day on, I vowed to become stronger. The group of classmates continued to bully me, but I chose to ignore them. My grandfather's words gave me all the strength I needed. With the encouragement of my grandparents, I applied to a combined middle and high school outside my district. This would finally allow me to get away from the classmates who had tormented me. Maybe my grandparents had that in mind when they suggested the school. Either way, I was filled with joy at the thought of finally being free. Once in middle school, I joined the soccer team, and between sports and studying, I enjoyed a fun and fulfilling life. There was no one around to tease me or called me poor just because I didn't have parents. That remained the same even after I entered high school. Every day at school was so much fun that I couldn't believe how different my life had become. It was during this time that I met a girl. It happened in my second year of high school. Right after moving up to the next grade, when I hadn't yet made any close friends, a girl named Katherine Thompson approached me. Katherine was different from me. She was bright, outgoing, and the kind of person everyone liked. On top of that, her father was the CEO of the well-known tea corporation in our area. Naturally, she was always at the center of attention, the type of girl who stood out. "Kevin, you're really smart. Could you help me study sometime?" That simple comment marked the beginning of me tutoring Katherine. After school, we'd spend time together in the library, and before I knew it, a new feeling started to grow inside me. It was the first time I had ever felt this way in my life. I wanted to be with Katherine more and more. Sensing my feelings, Katherine started staying by my side even more. "We'll always be together." Before I knew it, Katherine and I were dating. Once we started dating, my life became even more enjoyable. We walked to school together every morning, spent breaks together. And after soccer practice, we'd stop by the library and walk home together. Katherine and I were inseparable. "Man, I'm so jealous you've got a girlfriend like Katherine." The closest friend I have on the soccer team, Jonathan, looked at me with a grin. "You should get a girlfriend too. It'll change your life." Every day, I felt like the luckiest person in the world. But little did I know that happiness wouldn't last forever. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was busy every day. I was the captain of the soccer team, ranked first in my grade, and everyone seemed to have high hopes for my future. One morning, as I was finishing my usual routine and about to head to school, I noticed something strange about my grandfather as he sat reading the newspaper. "Grandpa, are you okay?" He tried to act like everything was normal, but something was definitely off. I immediately reported it to my grandmother. But before she could do anything, my grandfather suddenly started having difficulty breathing. My grandmother quickly called an ambulance, and my grandfather was rushed to the hospital. "Kevin, go to school. I'll keep you updated," my grandmother urged. But I couldn't focus on school, so I decided to go to the hospital with them. What the doctors told us at the hospital was shocking. My grandfather had been suffering from an illness and needed surgery. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed until now. I had never once heard my grandfather complain about not feeling well. And the realization hit me hard. He must have been keeping it to himself, not wanting to worry me or my grandmother. "Kevin, I'm sorry for making you miss school." My grandfather winced, looking guilty. I was filled with guilt for not realizing how unwell he had been, and in that moment, I made a decision. That summer, the topic of which university to attend was on everyone's mind. Katherine was also curious about my plans and said to me, "Kevin, let's stay close even after we become college students." Of course, I had no intention of ending my relationship with Katherine after high school. I wanted to stay with her forever. Of course, our relationship will last forever. At that time, I was keeping a secret from Katherine. It wasn't that I was trying to hide it. I just planned to tell her when the time was right. One day during a break, my homeroom teacher called me out into the hallway. With a slightly troubled expression, he got straight to the point. "Is it true you're not planning to go to college?" I nodded slowly after a brief pause. "I want to repay my grandparents for everything they've done for me, so I've decided to get a job." Hearing this, my teacher let out a long sigh. And he handed me a stack of papers. Yes, after my grandfather was hospitalized, I had found a new path for myself. To start working right after graduation. "You're so talented, it's a shame you're not going to college. If money's an issue, there are plenty of scholarships available. Why don't you reconsider?" My teacher's tone was gentle, trying to encourage me. But I had already made up my mind. "I appreciate your concern, but I've already decided. Besides, I've already got a job lined up, so there's no turning back." When I said this, my teacher seemed to accept my decision and relaxed his shoulders. Placing a hand on my shoulder, he said, "You're an incredible student, both academically and athletically. No matter which path you take, I know you'll do great. Be confident in the choice you've made." I nodded deeply at his kind words. Now all that was left was to tell Katherine about my plans. I was sure she'd understand once I explained my reasons. At least, that's what I believed. But in the next moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. Katherine was standing right behind me, and it seemed she had heard every word of my conversation with the teacher. I had wanted to tell her myself, so I was shocked. Katherine looked stunned. "Katherine, I didn't mean to keep it from you, but how could you keep something like this from me? And we were supposed to go to college together. You traitor! Katherine!" "Wait, please." But before I could stop her, Katherine ran off. I hadn't expected her to be so upset, and I chased after her, but I couldn't find her. From that moment, a deep rift formed between us. No matter how much I tried to talk to her, Katherine ignored me, refusing to even acknowledge my presence. With Jonathan's help, I finally managed to get a chance to talk to her, but she wouldn't look at me and just kept fiddling with her phone. I had no choice but to talk at her. "I'm sorry for not telling you earlier. I don't have parents, and my grandparents have been taking care of me." "That's why." Katherine's eyes widened in surprise. "What? You don't have parents? So that means you're poor, right?" "No, my grandfather is still working, and we're not struggling for money." "But I can't keep burdening them. So basically, you don't have any money." I can't believe I wasted my time dating a poor guy. I hate poor people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I never imagined those words would come from Katherine's mouth. The Katherine I knew was kind and full of compassion. I was shocked to discover this other side of her. As I stood there, speechless, Katherine said something even more astonishing. "I only dated you because you were good at sports in school. I don't even like your face. What a waste of time. We're not a couple anymore. So don't even think about talking to me." I was completely dumbfounded and couldn't say a word in response. Katherine gave me a condescending smirk and walked off, leaving me behind. Jonathan, who had been watching from a distance, rushed over and tried to comfort me with kind words, but none of it registered in my ears. I couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. After that incident, Katherine spread the rumor throughout the class that I was poor. I can't believe I dated someone so poor. I wish I could get my precious high school years back. When Katherine said this, the other girls in class chimed in. Maybe he was only after her money since she's the daughter of a CEO. How despicable, they said, criticizing me. It became increasingly difficult to stay in the class, but it was my soccer team members who saved me. Don't let it get to you. Calling someone a poor person is just wrong to begin with. Yeah, just ignore them. Thanks to them, I managed to make it through high school. My happy memories of high school were overshadowed by Katherine. Why didn't I realize Katherine's true nature in the first place? I couldn't stop regretting it. But there was no time for regrets. After graduating, I worked tirelessly, so much so that I didn't have time to think about Katherine at all. Unlike in high school, the idea that hard work always pays off didn't apply in the working world. There were days when, no matter how hard I tried, things didn't go well. Still, I kept working without taking a break. It was all because I wanted to repay my grandparents for everything they had done for me. In time, the complicated feelings I had for Katherine faded completely. Before I knew it, 17 years had passed. I was still working hard every day. One day, I received a postcard in the mail. It was an invitation to a high school reunion. A reunion! I wondered how the guys from the soccer team were doing. Suddenly, memories of my joyful youth flashed through my mind. At the same time, I also recalled Katherine, whom I had tried to forget. I wanted to attend, but I knew Katherine would probably be there. What kind of face would I put on if I saw her? After some thought, I decided not to attend. I wanted to see the soccer team guys, but I didn't want to face Katherine. However, shortly after making that decision, I got a phone call from Jonathan for the first time in years. We used to talk frequently right after graduation, but as we both got busier, we lost touch. "Hey, you're coming to the reunion, right? I've been wanting to see you, Kevin." Jonathan sounded excited. As I hesitated, Jonathan quickly added, "Everyone from the soccer team wants to see you too." Hearing that made my heart race. Before I knew it, I found myself saying, "Yeah, I think I'll go." I don't want to see Katherine, but I do want to see the soccer team. My feelings gradually shifted to wondering why I had to let Katherine control my life. With that, I decided to attend the reunion. On the day of the reunion, I was filled with both excitement and anxiety as I arrived at the venue. The place was far too luxurious for a reunion. It was a high-end hotel restaurant they had rented out. Feeling a bit nervous, I stepped inside and scanned the room. I quickly spotted Jonathan and the rest of the soccer team in the back. I walked toward them at a brisk pace. As soon as they saw me, their faces lit up, and they rushed over to greet me. We spent the next while happily reminiscing about the good old days. Katherine wasn't there, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then, it happened. Just as it was about time for the meal, the entrance to the hall suddenly became noisy, so I glanced over, and to my surprise, there stood Katherine. And she was holding hands with a man I vaguely recognized from somewhere. "Hey everyone, long time no see. Sorry for being late, I'm the organizer, after all." Katherine's high-pitched voice echoed clearly across the venue. It hadn't changed at all since high school. I let out a heavy sigh. Next to me, Jonathan noticed and asked, "Are you okay?" But all I could do was nod. Katherine, without hesitation, started walking straight toward me with the man she was with. I couldn't hide my surprise, not understanding why she was heading in my direction. When she finally reached me, she burst into laughter the moment she saw my face. "Kevin, that poor, miserable look on your face hasn't changed one bit." It was the first thing she said after all these years, and it only fueled my anger. I couldn't understand why she felt the need to say such things, so I ignored her and kept talking to Jonathan. But Katherine's words grew sharper. "Hey, are you even listening? You've always been so rude. Honestly, I don't even want to talk to someone as poor as you." Jonathan reacted strongly to this. He couldn't stay quiet anymore. "That's way too harsh. Kevin's not some poor person, and using that word is just wrong." Hearing Jonathan's defense, Katherine lashed out. "Excuse me. Do you even know what you're talking about? He stole my precious youth. But you know what? It's fine now because I've found someone far better, someone whose world's apart from Kevin." Jonathan and I exchanged glances. Katherine and the man standing beside her started smirking. "This is my fiancé, Nicholas. He graduated from a prestigious university and is set to become the next president of my father's company. He's far more capable than someone like you." Oh, and I'm sure you know him quite well. Nicholas. I looked closely at the man's face. Jonathan, confused, asked, "Do you know this guy?" Could it be? As I caught my breath, Nicholas looked at me and started laughing. What? You've forgotten me? I remembered this guy named Nicholas. Of course, I hadn't forgotten. How could I? This was the guy who had made my elementary school days miserable. Nicholas was the leader of the group that bullied me, calling me a poor kid back in elementary school. When we graduated, I had hoped I'd never see him again. I never imagined we'd meet like this. I whispered quietly. Of course I remember. So you're Catherine's fiancé. When I said this, Nicholas gave me a smug look and laughed. Yeah, marrying me is 1,000 times more beneficial for her than marrying someone like you, a high school graduate. Plus, Katherine and I are working hard to grow T Corporation even more. We're about to close a deal with AB Corporation. The moment Nicholas said that, the room began to buzz. Wow! You're working with AB Corporation? That's incredible. Nicholas had always been arrogant, looking down on anyone he considered beneath him. I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. That's great. I wish you both happiness. I said this and was about to walk away with Jonathan. But Katherine wasn't done hurling insults. So, where did you even manage to find a job with just a high school diploma? You're not working some part-time gig, are you? That wouldn't surprise me. Meanwhile, I'm the head of sales at my father's company. You should try to be more like me. Jonathan grabbed my arm and led me to a table, so we could sit down and get away from Katherine. Don't bother with people like them. Let's just enjoy the food and forget about it. Jonathan, usually so calm, looked visibly angry. I felt guilty for dragging him into this and decided I'd eat and then leave. Soon, plates of luxurious food began arriving. I had thought this reunion was going to be a buffet, but it turned out to be a full-course meal in an upscale setting. In a loud voice, clearly wanting everyone to hear, Katherine boasted, "This restaurant is owned by one of my father's friends. Everyone, enjoy as much as you like." The room filled with voices praising Katherine. As expected of the daughter of a company president. And her fiancé is an elite too, so lucky. As the waiter began serving the meals, Jonathan's eyes sparkled at the sight of the luxurious dishes. Then came my turn, or so I thought. But the waiter skipped over me and placed the next plate in front of the classmate beside me. I was confused. What was going on? I had paid the participation fee at the entrance, so it didn't make sense. Noticing the situation, Jonathan asked the waiter why I wasn't being served. The waiter, looking troubled, simply walked away toward the back. A few moments later, Katherine appeared in front of me, wearing a creepy smile. She handed me a plate piled high with salt. Jonathan and I exchanged bewildered glances. Then, Katherine threw a shocking remark at me. "Here, poor guy, eat this and go home. This salt should be enough for someone like you." You know, salt is used for purification in some cultures. We need to cleanse the place now that someone like you has shown up. Everyone around us stared in shock, unable to hide their surprise. Whispers spread throughout the venue. Soon after, everyone except Jonathan and the soccer team erupted in laughter. Jonathan, unable to hold back his anger, stood up and shouted, "I can't believe you treat a classmate like this." The soccer team members voiced their disapproval too. But Katherine continued her insults. "Hurry up and leave. We don't want to associate with someone as poor as you." Right, everyone?
Katherine looked at me with disdain, as if I were some kind of savage.
Yeah, get out.
My classmates are raising their voices. Even Nicholas, who had nothing to do with the situation, jumped in and yelled,
You're ruining the atmosphere. Eat your salt and get out.
I had braced myself for this before coming to the reunion, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. Although Jonathan and the soccer team stood up for me, I didn't want to ruin the reunion for everyone.
I stood up to leave.
And to my surprise, Jonathan and the soccer team members stood up as well.
This is disgusting. It's been 17 years since we graduated, and Katherine's still acting like a child. Yeah, she hasn't grown at all. Kevin, let's go.
There's no point wasting time here.
We'll grab a drink somewhere else. Once again, I let Jonathan lead me out of the venue.
Katherine and Nicholas watched us leave with triumphant looks on their faces. As soon as we stepped outside, Jonathan turned to me, visibly upset.
Why didn't you say anything back? What Katherine said isn't true.
You're not poor, Kevin. The other soccer team members nodded in agreement.
Jonathan was right.
I felt a little frustrated that I hadn't responded, but I knew that what Katherine said wasn't true. Still, I had no interest in engaging with people like her, who I believed had no bright future ahead.
Therefore, I didn't talk back. Even if I had said something, they'd just come back with more. It's not worth my time. The only reason I came to the reunion was to see you guys. Not to deal with Katherine or Nicholas. Katherine hasn't changed a bit. Anyway, let's forget about her and have a good time.
With Jonathan's words as a signal, I spent a great time with the soccer team members I hadn't seen in a while.
Though the reunion itself had been a disaster, I didn't regret attending. Months passed since the reunion.
I had been running around busy with work since the morning that day. Even though I had a business meeting coming up, I was frantically on the phone with a client. After the phone call ended, I headed to the meeting room where the business negotiations were scheduled to take place.
The company I work for is known globally as the top leader in the industry.
Because of this, many companies are eager to partner with us, hoping to secure a deal.
The company I was about to meet with was one of them. I opened the door to the meeting room and stepped inside.
To my surprise, Katherine was sitting on the sofa, her eyes wide with shock.
What are you doing here?
Are you seriously working here? Katherine stared at me with a suspicious look.
But I wasn't surprised to see her there. I already knew she'd be attending the meeting. Yeah, I work here, I said calmly. Then Katherine let out a mocking laugh. Oh, you must be a temp worker or something, right? There's no way someone like you could work at such a big company.
Once again, she looked down on me.
But I wasn't fazed.
As we stood there, the door to the meeting room opened again, and my subordinate, Henry, entered.
Thank you for coming today. Seeing Henry, Katherine raised her voice. Henry, you're the one handling our company, right? Is this guy also responsible for us? My company's future depends on this deal. And I don't want to work with someone like him.
To say such a thing to a potential business partner, it was clear that Katherine lacked common sense. I couldn't believe she was the head of sales at her company. It was obviously not a place worth doing business with.
Henry looked pale and panicked. Katherine, what are you saying? This man is... Just then, the door opened again, and Nicholas walked in. Sorry, I'm late.
Wait, why is Kevin here? Apparently, Nicholas was attending the meeting as Katherine's assistant.
He's just a temp worker here," Katherine added dismissively.
Nicholas, taking her words at face value, smirked. Henry, clearly alarmed, raised his voice to interrupt the conversation.
"A temp worker? What are you two talking about? This man is the president of this company. He's here today because the deal is so significant." "What? Who's the president? Impossible."
Both of them looked utterly bewildered, as if they had been hit with a bombshell.
Henry repeated himself. "The man you think is a temp worker is actually the president of our company. That can't be right. The president of AB Corporation is supposed to be Samuel Anderson, isn't it? The president's name doesn't match." "Henry, are you trying to trick us with Kevin or something?"
Their faces were filled with doubt as they glanced between Henry and me. Without missing a beat, I took out my business card and presented it to them.
"Sorry for not clarifying earlier. Samuel Anderson is my grandfather.
He stepped down as president last year, and I took over the company.
The reason our surnames are different is because he's my maternal grandfather." Upon hearing this, their faces turned pale, finally realizing the truth. "Yes, I am now the president of AB Corporation.
My grandfather started this company when he was the same age as I am now, but last year, he decided to step down. Then, he officially appointed me as the president.
This wasn't the first time my grandfather had asked me to take over the business.
In fact, since I was a senior in high school, he had frequently mentioned wanting me to succeed him. At the time, I knew my grandfather's company was large, but I wasn't interested in becoming the president, so I always dodged the conversation.
Shortly after, my grandfather fell ill. Seeing him weak and bedridden in the hospital was a shock. The grandfather I had known was young and strong.
But the man in the hospital bed looked frail, even older than his years.
Until I became a high school student, I owed everything to my grandparents. From now on, I vowed to protect them. At that moment, I made a vow to myself.
And so, I gave up going to college and decided to start working. Moreover, I decided to join my grandfather's company, eager to be of help to him.
At first, my grandfather was shocked, but after hearing my reasoning, he was overjoyed. I built this company from nothing with my own hands. I've always wanted to pass it on to you. It won't happen right away. But learn the ropes bit by bit and eventually, you'll take over for me."
Tears welled up in the eyes of my usually stern grandfather.
For years after that, I worked as my grandfather's secretary. A secretary's job involves everything from managing the president's schedule to preparing important documents. While I busied myself with these tasks, I steadily learned the ins and outs of running a company.
Now that Katherine and Nicholas had realized I was the president of AB Corporation, their attitudes quickly shifted.
"I had no idea Kevin was the president. If you'd told me your grandfather was the president, I wouldn't have thought you were poor. Who even started that rumor? Kevin is definitely wealthy." Katherine was acting as if she hadn't been at fault at all.
It was pathetic. On the other hand, Nicholas suddenly acted like we were old friends.
"Kevin, being president is impressive. How about we grab a drink together sometime?
There's truth to the saying, birds of a feather flock together."
Katherine and Nicholas had eerily similar personalities. Neither of them ever admitted their faults.
If they had sincerely apologized for everything they had done, perhaps my anger might have subsided, even a little. But unfortunately, they clearly had no intention of doing so. That's when I decided to drop a bombshell they hadn't seen coming. "Sorry you came all this way, but the $543 million contract is off the table."
We've decided to go with your rival." Katherine and Nicholas's faces turned to disbelief. Henry, stunned, immediately questioned me. "Mr. Turner, what are you saying?" "We were planning to have T Corporation manufacture the parts." I remained calm, determined to stay professional. "I refuse to do business with such disrespectful people. This deal is crucial for our company too, but I won't compromise on this." Hearing that, Katherine shot to her feet and rushed toward me, her voice desperate. "No, Kevin, please. We were such good friends. Let's not ruin this, let's go back to being close like before." Nicholas, seeing Katherine's reaction, echoed her plea. "Yeah, Kevin. We've known each other since we were kids. You can't abandon us like this. You know this contract is vital for our company's survival." They were never my friends. As I watched them scramble to act like we'd been close all along, I couldn't help but laugh. Seeing me chuckling, Katherine, misinterpreting the situation, started laughing too. "Oh, I knew you'd remember our old friendship. Let's finalize the deal now, shall we?" What nonsense! No matter what they said, I had no intention of rekindling any relationship with Katherine or doing business with her company. At that point, I handed over a document to Katherine. She and Nicholas looked at it with puzzled expressions, flipping through the pages. Then, in an instant, Katherine's face fell. "Why do you have this? This has to be fake." Nicholas, visibly shaken, tried desperately to hide the document. Henry, upon seeing the papers, looked as if he might collapse from shock. "I've already sent a copy of this document to your CEO, Mr. Thompson. So, it's too late to try and hide it now." "What? Why would you do such a thing? If this gets out, Nicholas and I won't get away with it. You're the ones at fault for doing things you didn't want people to find out." With that, the two of them fell silent, knowing there was no way out. The document that left Katherine and Nicholas visibly panicked was evidence of their embezzlement. The proof they had been misappropriating company funds. Henry looked at me in confusion. "Mr. Turner, why do you have such a document?" "It's only natural to thoroughly investigate any potential business partners," I replied. Henry nodded in agreement. I had known that Katherine and Nicholas would be coming to our company today. In fact, Katherine's father, the president of T Corporation, was a longtime friend of my grandfather. So close that they called each other by their first names. At Katherine's father's request, we had decided to consider a business deal with T Corporation. Our company, AB Corporation, is in high demand, and there's no shortage of companies eager to do business with us, even without active outreach. The only reason we considered a deal with T Corporation was due to that personal connection. However, my grandfather had mentioned something interesting to me. Even though T Corporation's sales are doing well, the financials don't seem to add up. What do you think is going on? There could only be one reason for such a discrepancy. Someone was stealing from the company. But a regular employee can't do something like that. Even if they tried, it would be found out in no time. That left only the higher-ups as suspects. So, I discreetly had the situation investigated. As expected, the results revealed a shocking truth. "Call my father right now and tell him that document is fake," Katherine shrieked, her anger directed at me. Why I was the one getting yelled at made no sense. But I wasn't going to stay silent. Why should I do that? As a responsible adult, you should handle the mess you've made. This contract is canceled, and there's nothing more to discuss. Now, leave. As I said this,
Katherine slipped off the engagement ring Nicholas had given her. Both Henry and I watched, puzzled, as she approached me with pleading eyes.
Kevin, I think we can still fix things. You used to love me, right? Let's start over. What do you say? Katherine. What are you talking about? Katherine's opportunistic nature knew no bounds.
At that moment, I felt deeply grateful we had broken up when we did. Nicholas, now seething, snapped at her.
Why are you flirting with Kevin now? You always said he disgusted you. Katherine turned on him, hissing, "Hey! Just keep quiet. If I can get back together with Kevin, all our problems will be solved. It's just temporary. But there are other ways to handle this." How? If we don't do something, we're going to get fired.
The two of them forgot all about the business meeting and started arguing loudly. Henry, seeing the chaos unfold, ran off to get security.
Ah, so that's what's going on. I finally understood Katherine's real intentions.
No matter what you say, my decision won't change.
You both need to leave, now. And don't ever contact this company again. Not that you'll have the chance to do so anyway. Katherine collapsed to her knees, sobbing loudly. Why is this happening? Please, forgive me.
I'll do anything you ask, just please.
I took a deep breath. And I spoke calmly.
There's only one thing I ask, never involve yourself with me again.
With that, I signaled to security, and Katherine and Nicholas were escorted out of the building. Even after they left, Katherine's crying could be heard echoing outside.
Not long after, T Corporation's president, Mr. Thompson, personally came to apologize. I deeply regret the trouble my daughter and her fiancé caused. Their disgraceful behavior was inexcusable, and I sincerely apologize for all the offenses they committed.
I was stunned by what I heard.
Given that he was Katherine's father, I had expected him to be similar to her, but he was nothing like her.
He was a reasonable, sensible man. He quietly explained the whole situation.
It turned out that Katherine and Nicholas had embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company, using the funds for personal expenses. Even the money for renting out the venue for the class reunion hadn't come from her father's friend's restaurant, as she claimed, but had been stolen from the company to maintain appearances.
Such selfish behavior. Katherine's father, realizing that neither she nor Nicholas showed any remorse, decided to fire them both.
Furthermore, fed up with Katherine's continued attempts to demand money from him, he severed all ties with her,
cutting off their parent-child relationship.
Katherine had begged tearfully, but he refused to listen. He regretted not taking action sooner, feeling it was his responsibility for letting things escalate. Up until now, all I had felt for Katherine was anger, but it seemed she was walking a path straight into her own personal hell.
I even felt a bit of pity for her.
But this was the result of her own choices, her own doing. In fact, it was a miracle things had gone well for her as long as they had. I could only hope that from now on, she and Nicholas would live in a way that didn't cause harm to those around them.
However, this story didn't end there.
A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Katherine and Nicholas had broken off their engagement.
The reason?
Nicholas had lost interest in Katherine after she was no longer the daughter of a company president.
But there was a twist.
Katherine was pregnant. She planned to raise the child on her own, but I wondered how she would manage.
Even knowing this, Nicholas had no intention of reconciling with her. What a despicable man. Katherine, now heavily pregnant, was reportedly working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet.
Though this situation was largely her own doing, part of me still felt a bit sorry for her. But in this world, bad deeds always come back to haunt you. If you don't want that outcome, you need to act with kindness and integrity from the start. Whatever happens, I will continue to protect the company my grandfather entrusted to me.
I used to be a brilliant surgeon. But that's just a title, nothing more.
I turned my back on what truly mattered and ran away like a coward.
Is there a doctor here, anyone?
A desperate mother called out, pleading for help for her daughter who had collapsed.
There's nothing I can do as a doctor anymore.
After all, a young doctor named James is already handling the situation, so I decided to stay out of it. But then, something unexpected happened.
Why isn't the needle working?
At this rate, the girl's life is in danger. I stood up reluctantly and said something far from what you'd expect from a doctor.
Can someone lend me a pen? My name is Eric.
I just turned 48 this year.
I don't have a life partner.
By choice, I remained single, and before I knew it, I was nearing my 50s.
My life has been nothing but work.
I worked tirelessly, barely stopping to rest, sacrificing even sleep, until I was completely burned out.
I just wanted to go home.
And the next thing I knew, I was on a plane headed back to Japan.
That's when I encountered something unexpected. Please, someone, help.
It felt like the first time in ages that I'd heard Japanese. I was on a flight that had just left an airport in Northern Europe. Although just left wasn't quite accurate, since the flight had already been going for over 6 hours.
The once quiet cabin was suddenly filled with tension, and the staff were rushing around frantically. I closed my eyes slowly. I used to be called a genius surgeon.
It's not something I'd say about myself, but it's the truth.
I'm Japanese, born and raised in Japan.
I grew up in a poor household, and my mother worked tirelessly so I wouldn't have to suffer.
My father wasn't around.
I don't even have a memory of him, and my mother never once talked about him, so I just assumed he wasn't worth much.
Whenever I showed the slightest interest in something, my mother would respond enthusiastically and try to nurture that curiosity. Why do stars shine? Apparently, I asked her that when I was 4 years old.
I also wondered why the Earth, though round and spinning, doesn't cause us to fall off, or why the sun and moon are rarely visible at the same time.
I was a kid full of questions.
Seeing that, my mother decided I was destined for a career in science and bought me all kinds of books and encyclopedias. I was absolutely fascinated by those encyclopedias, and from elementary through middle school, I was especially good at science and math. In high school, I chose the science and math track at the local public school, and since I came from a low-income household,
most of my tuition was waived.
Naturally, I aimed for medical school and got accepted on my first try. From there, everything seemed to fall into place. Getting into medical school wasn't the goal, it was just the beginning. There were plenty of tough moments, especially during hands-on training, but I persevered thanks to my mother. However, soon after I started working as a resident, my mother passed away from illness, likely worn down by years of hard work. I want to save people who are suffering from illness, just like my mother. With that single-minded determination, I chose to specialize in surgery, despite its reputation for being grueling. But the reality was harsh.
No.
This patient has been under my care for a long time.
Why? Injustice has always tormented me.
I was removed from a surgery I was supposed to perform simply because the patient was assigned to Dr. Taylor's son, the hospital director's heir. And this son, with little surgical experience, boldly picked up the scalpel, only for the patient to lose his life due to a medical error. That patient was a man in his early 60s, and he had joked that he didn't want to die before holding his soon-to-be-born grandchild. I had volunteered to perform the surgery, determined to make that goal a reality for him. But I was denied that chance because of hospital politics, and the patient lost his life. These kinds of things shouldn't happen, but in reality, they often do. Doctors like me can't go against people like Dr. Taylor or his family, or the senior physicians. Sure, there are good hospitals out there, but the one I worked at was rife with corruption, where ordinary doctors were treated like disposable tools. As if that wasn't hard enough to bear, Dr. Taylor's son casually said, "Medical mistakes are inevitable." That was the moment my anger boiled over. Before I knew it, I was suspended and eventually encouraged to resign. The thought that I may never be allowed to hold a scalpel in Japan again filled me with a deep sense of frustration. My mother's gone, and I have no reason to stay here. With that, I left Japan and started a new life overseas. Fortunately, foreign hospitals didn't hold my past in Japan against me. In fact, they laughed, saying the hospital had lost a skilled surgeon, and comforted me. For over 10 years, I contributed to the medical field abroad. I performed surgeries, helped out in understaffed departments, and gave my all. But now, at 48, I'm exhausted. I've saved many lives, but what I can do is limited. Thinking about my mother and the patient who tragically lost his life, I finally burned out. I decided to spend the rest of my life back in Japan, my homeland. And that's how I ended up on this plane. Yet, fate doesn't seem to want to let me go. Please, someone. I slowly opened my eyes. I had only been lost in thought for a few seconds. The cabin was still in chaos. I asked a nearby flight attendant what was going on. She said that it seems like there was an emergency. The patient is a young Japanese girl who apparently suffers from a chronic condition, and her symptoms have flared up. The mother, who had been shouting earlier, was frantically searching for some sort of device but couldn't find it, leading to her panic. I started to understand the situation. The device she was searching for was likely for administering insulin or something similar. After so many years as a doctor, I could piece things together just from hearing the situation. Then, a man raised his hand. "I'm a doctor from Japan." Without hesitation, the young doctor, James, rushed over to the girl and her mother. I watched the scene unfold from my seat, a little distance away. "What's your daughter's name?" "Sophia." Her father is from Northern Europe, and like him, Sophia also has diabetes. When people think of diabetes, most associate it with adults. However, that's usually type 2 diabetes, which is linked to lifestyle. There's also type 1 diabetes, which affects younger people, including children. Insulin is produced by the pancreas's beta cells. But sometimes, due to a malfunction, T cells from the immune system start attacking these beta cells. The immune response creates inflammation in the pancreas, leading to the destruction of these cells, and eventually, insulin production stops. This is the mechanism behind type 1 diabetes. Genetics also play a role, and in Northern Europe, type 1 diabetes is particularly common, with nearly 1 in 2 patients being diagnosed with it. So it wasn't surprising that this young girl had type 1 diabetes. We usually use a pump to administer her insulin. But it looks like we forgot the pump and only brought the cartridge. That explained the mother's panic. If they had the right equipment, she could have calmly managed her daughter's condition. But having the insulin without the necessary device was useless. After more than 6 hours into the flight, the girl's condition was rapidly worsening, and if nothing was done soon, she could suffer multiple organ failure, putting her life in serious danger. Even if we made an emergency landing at the nearest airport, it would be a gamble whether she'd make it in time.
Despite the desperate situation, James remained calm.
There was a reason for his composure.
That's a relief.
I also have diabetes and always carry a pen injector.
We can use this to administer insulin to Sophia.
The atmosphere shifted as people cheered. James, though young, had quick judgment and solid skills, so I figured there was no need for me to step in.
But then, a problem arose. Wait. It's not working. I glanced over again.
James was trying repeatedly to get the needle to come out of the pen, but it wasn't working, and precious time was slipping away. The girl's complexion was worsening, and she was starting to lose consciousness. I could see the panic in James's eyes as his hands began to tremble.
I took a deep breath. And I stood up slowly. Mind if I take that apart? James looked at me in disbelief as I suddenly appeared.
But there was no time to wait for his response. I took the injector from his hand, quickly disassembled it, and saw exactly what I had suspected.
The spring is broken. But we can fix this. Can someone lend me a ballpoint pen? I asked in both English and German, and people who understood immediately passed pens down to me in a relay.
The flight attendants called out in multiple languages, and soon, even more pens came my way. With permission, I disassembled them to extract the springs inside. I only needed one that fit, and with this many, surely one would work. After working with that mindset for about a minute, I finally found the matching spring. If we just do this, look, the needle's coming out. I handed the pen injector back to James, who promptly administered the insulin to Sophia. The cabin fell silent, and the sound of everyone holding their breath filled the air. A few moments later, the girl slowly opened her eyes. A loud cheer and applause erupted throughout the cabin. Sophia's mother, tears welling up in her eyes, expressed her gratitude.
I can't thank you enough.
I exchanged a few words and then quietly left the scene. I had only helped a little, and I believed the young doctor who had first stepped up to save the girl deserved the real praise.
Sophia's condition stabilized, and the remainder of the flight went smoothly, landing safely at Narita Airport without further incident.
Whether it was because of the long trip or dealing with the trouble, I felt an unusual level of exhaustion as I tried to get off the plane,
rolling my neck and shoulders. Then, I heard someone call out to me from behind. Thank you so much for what you did back there.
It was the mother from earlier.
No, I don't deserve any credit.
It was the young doctor who rushed over. And the idea for fixing the pen came from a student in an article I read once.
That was the truth.
I couldn't remember when, but I had read about a similar situation where a patient was saved by a student using the same method. I only managed to handle it because I happened to notice it and remembered. I was able to disassemble the insulin syringe without difficulty simply because, as a doctor, I was familiar with how to use it. So, there was no reason for anyone to thank me. Still, she wasn't ready to let it go. Even so, without you, my daughter might not have survived. I wanted to thank you during the flight, but I was too worried about her.
And we were sitting far away. As a fellow Japanese, I'm so proud of what you did. Please, let me thank you properly. She bowed deeply.
By now, most of the passengers had disembarked, and we were starting to hold up the staff preparing to clean the cabin.
Well, why don't we continue this at the airport lounge? I think they have some nice suites there, and your daughter can join us.
When I said that, the mother's face lit up with relief. Later, as I waited in front of the lounge, the mother and daughter arrived. I already knew the girl's name was Sophia, but when the mother introduced herself, I was taken aback.
My name is Kelly. Kelly, yes, she definitely said that. I can feel my heart pounding louder than usual. Kelly, could it be that Kelly? She looked at me in confusion. I knew this woman. She had been my first love. It's me. Eric.
Her eyes widened, and she covered her mouth in shock.
No way. Eric? Is it really you?
Sophia watched us with a big smile.
Kelly and I had met during college.
I was in the medical school, and she was in the economics department. We wouldn't have crossed paths normally, but we were both in the canoe club. Clubs were pretty much the only way to interact with students from other departments.
Kelly was like the sun.
When she laughed, everyone around her smiled, and if there was any trouble in the club, she'd step in and smooth things over in no time.
Everyone admired her.
It was only a matter of time before I fell for her, and as we spent more time together through club activities, my feelings grew. But I was too much of a coward to confess, and 4 years passed without me ever telling her how I felt.
Kelly graduated first, and over time, we drifted apart.
By then, I was buried in clinical rotations and preparing for the national medical exams, so my social life dwindled even within the medical school. I barely interacted with anyone except close friends. I locked away my feelings for Kelly, stashing them in a drawer deep inside my heart, securely locking it shut. But standing in front of her now, I realized how futile that lock had been. Even after all these years, I still felt a faint spark of those old feelings.
It's a bit awkward standing here, so let's go inside.
Yes, let's. We awkwardly made small talk and sat down at a table in the lounge, the three of us. I had a friend working here who had arranged for some child-friendly sweets, like chocolate cake and shortcake, to be prepared in advance. I ordered a black coffee, while Kelly chose a café au lait with plenty of sugar and milk. After a brief, awkward silence, Sophia spoke up first.
Thank you for saving me, mister.
Hearing those words from the daughter of the woman I once loved stirred emotions in me that were hard to describe. It was clear from Kelly's words on the plane, and the fact that she had a daughter, that she was already someone else's partner. So, I knew I had no right to feel this way. But when I looked into Sophia's eyes, I couldn't help but be reminded of the Kelly I once knew, the one I spent so many days with in the canoe club.
Sophia, can mommy talk with this man for a bit?
After saying that, Sophia nods with a smile and moves toward the counter with the plate of cake in hand. As my friend, the staff member, kept Sophia company, Kelly and I sat there in awkward silence, just staring at each other.
Well, it's been a long time. I never expected to run into you like this. Kelly gives me a gentle smile in response to my words. I'm surprised too.
It's been so long, Eric.
What were you doing on that plane? I hesitated, unsure of where to begin.
If she were still the kind, understanding person I remembered, maybe she'd sympathize with my struggles. But what I did, though indirect, essentially left an important patient behind.
And that means I ran away.
Surely, kind-hearted Kelly would understand my struggles and hardships, and she would probably comfort me, saying it must have been tough. However, in front of Kelly, my unnecessary pride always got in the way, and I couldn't tell her the truth. I lived in Japan for a while, but things happened, and I ended up overseas. Now, I just figured it was time to return home for good.
No deep reason.
It wasn't a lie, but even so, I felt uneasy after saying it.
Kelly's eyes took on a melancholic look as she gazed at me.
Eric, did you ever get married? The emotions I had buried for so long began to flare up inside me.
Then, like a wave crashing over me, the feelings came rushing back. Of course not. We never said anything back in college, but I always thought we were close. Remember when I asked you to the fireworks festival before you graduated? You never came. I took that as your answer.
My voice was low and heavy, as if trying to suppress the anger and disappointment from all those years ago.
Kelly flinched slightly, her shoulders trembling as she looked down, troubled. I wasn't just dealing with an unrequited crush.
I had tried to express my feelings, but in the end, it all fell apart, leaving me scared to love again.
That's why I've remained single to this day. But that was my issue, not Kelly's. She didn't simply stand me up that day. Her family had an emergency and she had to prioritize them.
This was nothing more than me lashing out.
I understood that logically.
Yet, the trauma of my first love falling apart in an instant still haunted me, stirring confusing emotions I hadn't fully processed.
I'm sorry. You made the right choice back then. Family is far more important than fireworks.
I was a fourth-year medical student at the time. I should have known better.
This is my problem, not yours. Eric.
Kelly called after me, but I ignored her and rushed out of the lounge. At my age, I should know better than to act so immaturely, throwing a tantrum over a long-past heartbreak. We hadn't stayed in touch, and we hadn't exchanged contact information.
If I left now, I might never see her again. But after revealing such ugly emotions, I couldn't imagine facing her again. I started to walk away, trying to push forward. But then, why is Sophia here? Oh, because we live here now.
Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor.
What kind of grudge did it hold against me?
The apartment I had rented to spend the rest of my life in peace was right next to Kelly and Sophia's. I hadn't planned on socializing much with my neighbors, just offering polite greetings if we crossed paths. I certainly didn't expect my first encounter to be with Sophia, coming home from school with her backpack.
Do you live here, mister? Yeah, I guess I do. Sophia, could you maybe not tell your mom about this? Don't worry, I won't say a thing. But in exchange, I want you to teach me something. As I wondered what she meant, Sophia pulled a thick book out of her backpack. It looked like something she had borrowed from the school library, filled with information about planets, galaxies, and the universe. A wave of nostalgia hit me. It was just like the encyclopedia my mother had bought me all those years ago. You know, I'm going to be a middle schooler soon. Since this is my first time going to a school in Japan, there's a lot I don't understand. But I love science. Can I ask you questions if I don't get something in this book? Mommy said you're really good with constellations and space stuff. It didn't surprise me that Kelly would remember my love for stargazing, something we'd shared during our time in the canoe club. But that was a story from decades ago. I can't believe she still remembers it. Sure, I'll help with whatever I can. When I said that, Sophia flashed an irresistible smile, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't help but see Kelly's face behind it, filling me with guilt. From that day on, Sophia and I began our secret lessons. Most planets don't have much water, right? So why does Earth have so much? Have you heard of comets? They're full of water and organic materials, the kind of stuff that's essential for life. Scientists think Earth's oceans were formed when comets with loads of water crashed into it a long, long time ago. As I spoke, Sophia scribbled notes in her notebook, switching between the encyclopedia and my explanations. I really wonder where this child's questions come from. At one point, I found myself seeing a bit of my younger self in her, and my heart skipped a beat. She's the child of someone I once loved, a complete stranger to me. Yet somehow,
Without even realizing it, I've grown close to Sophia, almost as if she weren't a stranger at all. The months flew by, and before I knew it, Sophia had grown into a responsible middle schooler. Dressed in her still loose sailor uniform, she started sharing her goals for the future.
I want to join the science club. I've never been that strong, so I get out of breath easily when I exercise. And with type 1 diabetes, Mommy worries when I push myself too hard. If I get stuck with any of the new schoolwork, can I still ask you for help? Sophia said this with a cheerful skip in her step as she headed off to school. Watching her leave, I spoke to the figure behind me without turning around. You figured out I was your neighbor, didn't you? Looking a little sheepish, Kelly stepped out from where she had been hiding. At first, I thought Sophia was meeting some stranger. But then I overheard her mention the name Eric, and when I asked the landlord, they told me the man next door was named Eric. I kept watching, and when I confirmed it was really you, I felt better. Thank you for teaching Sophia. She's had a hard time adjusting to school in Japan, and you've been a real support for her. I should apologize for sneaking around. But Sophia is such a diligent student. I don't think she'll have any trouble fitting in at school. Talking about Sophia brought an involuntary smile to my face. I realized that somewhere along the way, she had become more than just the neighbor's kid to me. She had become someone I deeply cared about. Then, Kelly changed the subject. What about after you graduated from medical school? You became a doctor, right? I mean, only someone with real experience could handle that insulin pen on the plane so easily. Of course, she would want to know. The truth was, I was just as curious about her life. As you guessed, I became a doctor after med school. But after years of exhaustion, I left Japan. Since then, I've led a pretty uneventful life. What about you? What happened to Sophia's father? I could tell by the way Kelly's face clouded over that this was a sensitive topic, and I regretted asking. Sorry, I shouldn't have asked. Forget I said anything. Kelly interrupted me, her voice firm. No, it's fine. I want to tell you everything, Eric. I've been carrying regrets ever since that fireworks festival. She began to speak, unraveling the memories that had remained frozen in time. That night, it was my father who was rushed to the hospital. He suddenly collapsed from a seizure, and my mother called an ambulance. I joined them at the hospital during his emergency surgery, praying he'd make it through. He survived, but there were complications. And for years after that, he was in and out of the hospital. He passed away recently because of that hospital's negligence. The brightness I had always associated with Kelly seemed to dim as she spoke, her voice now carrying a weight I never thought I'd hear from her. The name of a patient I had failed to save came rushing back to me. Edward. How do you know my father's name? I collapsed to my knees, the weight of realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. Edward, 61 years old. He was one of my patients, the man who lost his life because of the negligence of Dr. Taylor's son. No, this can't be happening. Edward was your father? I clutched my chest tightly. My breath becoming shallow as the memory of that day rushed back. My throat burned with the intensity of the guilt, the pain nearly unbearable. Kelly watches with a worried expression. Don't tell me your father was in charge of that? Are you involved in this? Confusion, then anger, flares up in Kelly's eyes. I can't say anything, standing there frozen as time slowly passes. It's as good as admitting it.
But I also bear responsibility for not being able to stop Director Taylor's son from spiraling out of control. And a few months ago, I told Kelly that because her father collapsed on the night of the fireworks festival, I couldn't express my feelings to her.
Regret overwhelms me now. No matter what Kelly says to me, I have to accept it all.
I know that, yet my heart can't catch up with the reality. The awkward silence is suddenly broken by Sophia, who should have already left for school. Mom, he tried to help Grandpa. Both of our gazes shift to Sophia. She lets out a small sigh and then returns to her room. After a while, she comes back holding something in her hands.
Grandpa gave this letter to Dad.
He told Dad to keep it a secret from you and to give it to me instead. Now that I think about it, Edward used to write letters all the time. When I asked who they were for, he said they were for his grandchild. At that time, Edward's daughter, Kelly, had just moved abroad, married a local man, and was expecting a child. Maybe Edward, who had been in and out of the hospital for years, knew that his time was coming.
Apparently, there was also a letter for you, Mom, but because you were so sad about Grandpa, Dad decided to give it to me instead. All of Grandpa's feelings are written in here.
Sophia slowly begins to read the letter aloud. In it, Edward expressed a lot of gratitude toward me, his doctor. Sophia continues reading, her voice gentle. Eric, who was Mom's friend, was my doctor.
Mom liked Eric, but when Grandpa collapsed, she broke their date to rush to Grandpa's side. Grandpa regretted that.
I felt guilty for interfering with Mom's first love and for having that very person end up as his doctor.
Kelly, I'm so sorry.
In that moment, Kelly collapses to the floor, sobbing. She cries openly, without regard for anyone around her, tears streaming down her face.
I, too, feel a deep sense of helplessness. Edward had understood everything.
He trusted me, even though I was only 36 at the time, saying he could entrust everything to me.
But I couldn't save him.
If only I had insisted on performing the surgery that day, maybe Edward could have met Sophia, the granddaughter he had been waiting for.
I made an unforgivable mistake.
And I ran away, trying to escape from the guilt. In the end, I caused nothing but pain for my first love.
I don't know what to do anymore.
Sophia softly breaks the silence.
Mom, I think Grandpa was happy.
He had Eric, who he trusted, taking care of him, and even after he passed, there are people here crying for him. For the sake of Dad, who let you come back to Japan because it was what you wanted, you need to look forward. Kelly had told me she regretted avoiding me after that fireworks festival. She went on a trip abroad to escape reality, where she met Sophia's father, got married, and started a life overseas. She had been trying to forget me, and then, just when she was about to give birth to Sophia, she received the news of Edward's passing.
I thought I was going to lose my mind. I couldn't forgive anyone involved with my father's death, not the hospital, not anyone.
Almost 13 years have passed since then, and I've finally found some peace. I talked to my ex-husband, and I told him I wanted to come back to Japan.
I couldn't rest until I avenged my father's death. He understood.
He couldn't come to Japan because he's running his business there.
But he still let me go. What you want is what I want, he said.
Even though we're divorced, I still love him. But after reading the letter and learning about Eric, all my thoughts of revenge disappeared.
Kelly gives a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. She had been just like me.
Let me apologize again for what happened to Edward.
That day, I wasn't even allowed into the operating room. I was powerless. I couldn't stop thinking about him, and eventually, I fled overseas. But
The words Edward said before he passed have never left my mind. Home is a good place. A month before the surgery was scheduled, Edward told me that. Even though his illness brought him a lot of suffering, he said that if he could spend his final moments in the land where he was born and raised, it would be worth it. Could I really allow myself to live out my life abroad, continuing to run away? With that thought in mind, I felt compelled to return to Japan to Edward.
Kelly, revenge doesn't suit you. But let me carry out your will. I think I've finally realized why I came back here. I wasn't just seeking peace.
I kept telling myself that I couldn't keep running, trying to summon the courage to finally confront everything.
I'm going to fight.
Even though it happened 13 years ago, what we lost was too precious to be buried and forgotten.
So, please, leave it to me.
When I said that, Kelly looked at me with fierce determination, and she gripped my outstretched hand tightly. After that, I began digging through old records, contacting people who were involved, and gathering evidence.
Eventually,
I helped expose Dr. Taylor and his son. If it had been just about that one incident, it might have been swept under the rug.
However, even after Edward, those two didn't learn their lesson and continued engaging in illegal and criminal activities.
It was thanks to my efforts in reaching out to the right people that their embezzlement of hospital funds was exposed through a whistleblower. And in the end, both of them were arrested.
Was this justice? I wasn't sure. Even with them behind bars, nothing could bring Edward back.
But in some way, we were finally free from the time that had been frozen for so long. The fog that had clouded my heart lifted, and I felt a new sense of clarity and peace.
See you later.
Sophia, now in high school, was attending a science-focused school. She had decided she wanted to become an astronomer.
It seems she's taken after you. But an astronomer, not a doctor? Kelly remarked with a smile. I think it's perfect. Right, Michael?
It's only fitting for the daughter of someone who worked in astronomy. I called out to the tall man standing next to Kelly. Michael is Kelly's ex-husband, but it seems he couldn't stop worrying about his wife and child back in Japan. So he handed over his business to a successor and came here. At the time, they both seemed hesitant, so I had told them,
why don't you just get remarried here? I mean, what did Michael come all the way here for?
Kelly, Michael is the man who gave up his job to follow you.
You two are really hopeless, aren't you?
Taking my advice, they bashfully registered their marriage again in Japan.
I signed as a witness.
Sometime later, Sophia and I were stargazing late at night, watching a meteor shower. As we stared up at the sky, she quietly said,
You're like a comet. Me? A comet? Yeah. Comets carry water and the building blocks of life, right?
You saved me on that plane, brought my family back together,
and helped Grandpa pass away without regrets.
You're like the source of life for our family. She smiled warmly as she said it. But in my eyes, Sophia was the real comet.
A bright, guiding light that brought everything full circle. How could anyone do something like that in the middle of all this chaos? And I'm not even married yet. This is disgusting. Pervert. Creep.
The woman, who had come as a customer to my restaurant, glared at me with a look of utter disdain.
Why would she misunderstand like that? I was completely baffled. Just then, her fiancé stormed into the restaurant. That man groped me. He grabbed me. Clinging to her fiancé, she started to cry.
I tried to explain the misunderstanding, but her fiancé's piercing gaze made me freeze up. Come to think of it, I saw you touch her chest earlier.
What? I can't believe this. At her fiancé's words, the woman's face grew even more devastated. Was he talking about the CPR I had performed?
In that situation, it should have been obvious that I was just trying to save her, with no ulterior motives, so why? However, she would later come to regret this behavior deeply. When she came to apologize, she blushed and said, "I want to, with you.
Please."
As she shyly approached.
Cedar Inn is a family-owned restaurant with a history stretching back to the 1800s.
My parents, who ran the restaurant, took pride in it and cherished the loyal customers who had supported Cedar Inn for so long. As a child, I was always proud of my parents and Cedar Inn. Naturally, my dream for the future was to take over the family business. To improve my skills as a chef, I enrolled in culinary school to earn my certification. It meant leaving my hometown, but my parents sent me off with their full support. However, while I was still in school, my father passed away. I wanted to drop out immediately and take over the restaurant. But my mother wouldn't allow it. Raymond, focus on your studies.
Leave Cedar Inn to me.
Trusting my mother's words, I devoted myself to my studies. I eventually earned my culinary certification and graduated from college, returning to work at Cedar Inn under my mother, who had become the head chef. But after my father's death, it seemed my mother had pushed herself too hard managing the restaurant on her own. She developed heart problems. 2 years after I returned to Cedar Inn, she passed away.
I was left alone. But even by myself, I resolved to keep Cedar Inn alive.
I not only focused on improving the flavor of my dishes but also taught myself how to better interact with customers. I even tried introducing trendy dishes I found on social media, hoping to attract more customers.
But reality wasn't so kind.
Longtime regulars wrinkled their noses at the new dishes I introduced.
Even though I ignored their reactions and kept offering the new menu, the online reviews weren't great either. Raymond, did you see the Eats review?
Cedar Inn's rating has dropped to 2 stars. My childhood friend, Andrew, who often came by to check on me in the restaurant, showed me his phone as he said that. Eats Review is an online review site where anyone can rate restaurants. Of course, a restaurant's permission is required for it to be listed, but the restaurant can also register itself and post its information. Since the platform had a large user base, I thought it would be good for promoting the restaurant, so I decided to sign up. It turned out to be a mistake.
The staff's attitude feels like they're resting on their laurels as an established restaurant.
It used to be delicious. But when I went back recently, the quality had dropped.
It seems like a younger chef took over. Not worth going. Wow. They're really going all out. Stop, just stop.
I couldn't help but cry out in an ear scream, and Andrew, looking apologetic, placed his phone on the table.
But seriously, this is bad.
We need to figure out a way to turn this around. He was trying to be encouraging, but neither of us could come up with a good idea. I'll let you know if I think of anything, Andrew said as he paid the bill and left.
He was my only customer today. I sighed as I looked at the unused ingredients in the quiet, empty restaurant.
One day, just like many others, 2 hours had passed since opening.
Yet, no one had come in.
Andrew, who worked as a security guard at the nearby high school, had recently complained that new hire quit right away.
So I'd been stuck with more overnight shifts, and he hadn't been able to drop by lately. Once again, I was going to have to throw out unused ingredients.
I was lost in thought about this when the sound of the entrance door opening echoed through the empty restaurant.
Welcome. My voice cracked involuntarily. When I saw the two people who entered, I couldn't help but gasp. They were the very definition of a stunning couple. The woman, elegantly dressed in a white suit, had long, well-kept hair tied up and scanned the room with sharp, almond-shaped eyes. Behind her, the man, who gazed at her with clear affection, had a noble, refined face, and wore a sleek black long coat that seemed tailor-made to complement her appearance. Excuse me, can we order? Snapped out of my daze by the man's voice, I hurriedly regained my composure.
At some point, they had seated themselves in the dining area and were browsing the menu.
Of course. Go ahead. I'll have this seasonal A set. What about you, Katherine? Wait a minute. I was going to order the A set. You change yours. All right. She'll have the A set, and I'll take the B set. Got it. Please wait a moment. Excited to have new customers for the first time in a while, I eagerly started preparing their meals. I began by serving some pickled turnips as an appetizer. That's when the woman spoke up. Excuse me, can I ask you something? I was startled when she continued, I'd like to do an interview. Can I take some photos of the restaurant, the food, and of you cooking? I also have a few questions I want to ask you. Caught off guard, I didn't know how to respond.
Katherine, you're supposed to introduce yourself first in situations like this. The man laughed lightly and handed me a business card. Katherine, as he called her, hurriedly did the same. Their cards read, Killian Foster, Managing Editor at Daylight Press, and Katherine Yates, Editor-in-Chief of Upton Magazine. My name's written like this, but it's pronounced Killian.
It's hard to read, right? Killian smiled as he pointed to his name on the business card. I could only manage a half-hearted I see. Daylight Press was a well-known publishing company, one of the top 3 in the country. I write articles about restaurants with low ratings on each review to see if those reviews are really fair or not. And this time, your restaurant is in the spotlight. Not bad, huh? And you seem to have some free time.
Katherine puffed out her chest proudly.
Her condescending attitude rubbed me the wrong way. I'm going to have to decline. Katherine blinked in surprise. Why? If we give your restaurant a positive review, you'll get tons of new customers. Isn't it common courtesy to ask for permission ahead of time before doing something like this? What's the big deal? You don't have any other customers right now. We're offering to feature your place.
Her tilted head and dismissive tone made my blood boil.
But I counted to 6 in my head and held it in. Losing my temper easily was one of my flaws.
I've always been quick to anger, especially when it came to Andrew, my childhood friend.
When we were kids, Andrew would cry over everything.
He'd cry if a bug touched him, cry when he fell, and cry when girls teased him for it.
Every time Andrew cried,
I'd snap at him, saying, "You're a guy. Stop crying over such small stuff." One day, Andrew came to me in tears after a boy in our class teased him, saying, "You've got such a tough-sounding name, but you're really weak."
He's right, you know. You were given such a strong name, aren't you embarrassed?
Frustrated by how easily Andrew cried over everything, I ended up saying that to him. Andrew looked shocked, his lips trembling as he slowly backed away, and then he ran off, heading home.
That night, Andrew's parents came to Cedar Inn in a panic, saying that Andrew had run away from home.
Apparently, he left a note in his room that read, "I'll come back stronger."
Hearing that, I felt the blood drain from my body. It was because of what I said out of frustration. Andrew had gone as far as the next town. My father found him and safely brought him back to his parents. "I'm sorry, Andrew." I said that because I was frustrated. You don't have to live up to your name and be strong.
When I apologized to him, Andrew shook his head.
It's true that I'm weak. This time, I'll find a way to get stronger so no one has to worry about me again.
We made up after that, and my father, watching us with his arms crossed, gave me a stern warning. "Raymond, you have a temper, so be careful. There's a saying, a sharp tongue can cut lives. It means that if you speak carelessly in anger, it could lead to serious consequences, even death.
Be as mindful with your words as you are with your knives."
Those words weighed heavily on my heart. Since then, I've made a conscious effort to remember the saying, a sharp tongue can cut lives.
As I exhaled, holding back my frustration, Killian clasped his hands together apologetically in front of me. "Come on, I promise this won't hurt your restaurant."
Honestly, I didn't like it, but if I could hold it together, maybe this could help restore the restaurant's reputation. With that in mind, I decided to endure.
You're free to take photos. As for the interview, can we wait until after I've served all the food? Sure, that works. Thanks.
Hearing my approval, Katherine immediately pulled out her camera and started snapping photos all over the place. She even walked right into the kitchen without asking and kept taking pictures without hesitation.
Hey, is it true this place has been around since the 1800s? Why did you decide to become a chef here? Excuse me, we agreed to do the interview later.
And please don't go into the kitchen without permission. Katherine, who had just placed a white pen on a nearby shelf, frowned in annoyance at my response.
Come on, there's no one else here. What's the big deal? That's not the point. I finally raised my voice.
Katherine looked at me in shock, like a deer caught in headlights.
Katherine, you're being a nuisance. Come back and sit down.
Killian called out, and reluctantly, Katherine returned to her seat. Honestly, I was relieved, and I let out a sigh of relief.
At least Killian seemed like a reasonable guy, even if Katherine wasn't.
I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and focused on preparing the food. I served macaroni and cheese and clam chowder, with buffalo wings and garlic parmesan flavor as the main dish for Katherine, and a barbecue pulled pork sandwich for Killian. But Katherine wrinkled her nose.
What is this? It doesn't match the atmosphere of the restaurant at all. And garlic? That's going to make my breath stink. Come on now, let's trade. You can have mine instead. Oh, thanks, Killian. As I prepared the dessert, still irritated by Katherine's comments, I suddenly heard Killian's panicked voice, "Katherine."
I rushed out of the kitchen to find Katherine collapsed on the floor.
What happened? I don't know.
She was eating her food, and then suddenly started struggling to breathe. Looking closely, Katherine was gripping her throat as if she were choking herself.
This was the universal choking sign.
This was the universal sign people make when they're choking, which meant Katherine had likely gotten food stuck in her throat. I had learned how to handle cases of food choking back in college.
Katherine, can you hear me?
I shook her shoulder and called out, but there was no response.
She wasn't coughing and had gone limp. She's unconscious. Killian, call an ambulance. And there's an AED at the high school nearby, go grab it.
Oh, okay. At my instructions, Killian hurriedly pulled out his phone and started dialing 911.
In the meantime, I began performing chest compressions.
I placed my hands in the center of her chest and pushed hard and fast, focusing on saving her. I could feel the softness under my hands, but now wasn't the time to worry about that.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
Killian, who had finished his call, looked at me in shock and accused me.
That's when I finally lost my patience. Just go get the AED already. If you don't hurry, she could die. My outburst startled Killian, and he quickly rushed out of the restaurant.
I continued to administer chest compressions with everything I had.
Suddenly, Katherine coughed. Katherine, hang in there.
I patted her shoulder to encourage her, and this time, she responded.
She let out a faint groan.
It looked like she had regained consciousness. I stopped the chest compressions, sat her up, and firmly patted her back. Checking her mouth from time to time, it seemed like the blockage hadn't come out yet, as she still looked like she was struggling to breathe. I decided to perform the Heimlich maneuver. I wrapped my arms around Katherine's waist from behind, leaning her body forward. I placed my fist just below her sternum and overlapped it with my other hand. I then thrust upward with strong force.
After each thrust, I checked Katherine's condition.
After performing the Heimlich maneuver 3 times, Katherine let out a large cough, and the piece of food she was choking on fell from her mouth. When I saw her take a deep breath, I felt the tension leave my body.
She was safe. But my relief didn't last long. What do you think you're doing holding onto me like that? Katherine let out a scream and drove her elbow into me.
It hit me square in the stomach, and I doubled over in pain, groaning.
How dare you take advantage of me during such a critical moment? And I'm not even married yet. You're disgusting. Pervert. Creep.
Katherine glared at me as if I were the filthiest thing she'd ever seen.
Why would she misunderstand like this? I was completely bewildered. Just then, Killian and Andrew burst into the restaurant, with Andrew holding the AED. Since Andrew was still in his security uniform, it looked like he was in the middle of his shift. Killian. That man groped me. He grabbed me. Katherine clung to Killian, tears streaming down her face.
I tried to explain the misunderstanding, but Killian's sharp glare made me hesitate. Now that you mention it, I saw you touching her chest earlier.
What? I can't believe it. At Killian's words, Katherine's expression turned into one of despair. Was he referring to the chest compressions?
In that situation, it should have been obvious that I was just trying to save her without any ulterior motives, so why were they twisting this?
Well, Katherine, I'm just glad you're okay. If anything had happened to you, I wouldn't be able to face your father. Good thing I was able to act quickly. Killian, you saved me.
Looking up at Killian with a soft gaze, Katherine blushed as her cheeks flushed pink.
This is all wrong.
I'm the one who saved her. Those thoughts kept swirling around in my head, but I couldn't say a word. The scene in front of me was so unbelievable that I stood there, too stunned to even get angry. Katherine, supported by Killian, glared at me with sharp eyes.
I'm going to press charges for sexual assault.
What? I tried to approach her to explain myself,
but Killian stepped in and blocked my way. Did you see the name of the company on the business card I gave you? She's the daughter of Yates, the CEO of Daylight Press. Now, if this goes to court, who do you think will win? Killian smirked. Just then, the ambulance arrived, and Katherine was taken to the hospital as a precaution. Killian followed her. Once the sound of the ambulance siren faded, I collapsed to the floor. Andrew came over to support me. Hey, what happened? There's no way you'd ever be a creep. I was just trying to help her. So why did this have to happen?
Just like the dark night sky above me, everything in front of me seemed pitch black.
Andrew gently patted my back, trying to comfort me. If they really do take you to court, I'll be your witness, no doubt. I let out a bitter laugh at his attempt to cheer me up. I appreciated his words, but honestly, I didn't feel like I stood a chance against the daughter of a CEO from such a major publishing company. After thinking it over for a few days, I decided to close the restaurant at the end of next month. I hadn't heard from Katherine since that day, but I didn't want people to think I was closing because of her lawsuit. That's why I made my decision early. I contacted the regular customers who had been coming for years. They all sounded shocked on the phone and then said, "That's such a shame." From the day I made the calls, more customers began showing up. They made time to visit, saying, "We wanted to stop by one last time." For these loyal customers, I took the new menu items off the table and only served the traditional dishes that had been passed down at Cedar Inn for generations. This isn't the sharp, rich flavor I remember. This is the true taste of Cedar Inn. The regulars savored their meals with smiles on their faces. Then, looking a bit guilty, they lowered their brows. "We're sorry for staying away from the restaurant for so long." No, the fault lies with me. I was too focused on attracting new customers and failed to appreciate the ones who had been coming here all along. My parents always valued you all above everything else. It's only natural to want to bring in new customers. I'll keep coming as often as I can until you close. The encouragement from these regulars brought me to the brink of tears, but I managed to hold back and expressed my gratitude as best I could. Determined to show my appreciation, I worked even harder in the kitchen, trying to serve the best food I could. The days after I decided to close were busy, even though it was only the regular customers coming in. "Raymond, want me to help serve the food?" Popping his head into the kitchen was Andrew. "That'd be great, but you've been coming here a lot lately." "How's work going?" "A new hire started, so my shifts are back to normal." "That's good to hear." "All right, take this to table 8. "Sure thing." As Andrew reached for the tray of food, his eyes caught something on a nearby shelf. "Raymond, this isn't yours, right?" Andrew pointed to a white pen. I frowned instinctively. "That's the one that CEO's daughter left behind." "Oh, that. Want me to return it for you?" "If I drop it off at Daylight Press, it'll probably get back to her." "I'd really appreciate that." Honestly, just thinking about her still makes my blood boil. "Leave it to me." Andrew picked up the pen. Then he tilted his head slightly, saying, "Huh? What is it?" "Nah, it's nothing." With a somewhat puzzled expression, Andrew pocketed the pen and went off to deliver the food. It was the day just 1 month before closing, when the storm-like CEO's daughter appeared again. That day, the restaurant was full of regulars. She seemed surprised by the sight, her eyes wide. As she hesitated, unsure where to sit, one of the regulars gestured toward a table and said, "Hey there, young lady, this spot's open." She nodded politely, lowering her head in thanks, then took a seat while glancing nervously at me as I worked in the kitchen. To be honest, I wanted her to leave. I didn't know why she was here, but I didn't have time to deal with her. We were too busy. Besides, as I had told Andrew, just thinking about her made my blood boil, and I wanted nothing more to do with her. But since she had already sat down, I had no choice. After serving the other customers, I went over to take her order. Today, she wasn't in her usual suit. Instead, she wore a cream-colored cardigan with delicate white flower embroidery and a long, flowing white skirt. I didn't come here to eat today. Then why are you here? If it's not for a meal, please make an appointment first. Maybe you thought we'd be free like last time, but as you can see, we're busy now. You're an editor-in-chief, right? If you're in any kind of leadership position, you should think about how your actions affect others. Being a CEO's daughter doesn't excuse that. I tried to remain as calm as possible as I spoke, and she lowered her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. Even so, she didn't leave. I let out a sigh. If you absolutely need to talk, sit there and wait. With that, I quickly returned to the kitchen. When I glanced at her, she seemed to shrink into her seat but kept looking around the restaurant, observing everything. I continued cooking, serving food to customers, guiding new arrivals to their tables, and taking orders, busy as always. Then, suddenly, Katherine walked into the kitchen. At first, I was annoyed, thinking she was barging in again. But when I looked up, I saw she was tense, her body stiff. Is there anything I can do to help? I was taken aback for a moment by her offer. Okay. Can you take that dish over there to table 1? The table numbers are next to the chairs. Yes. Table 1, got it. She eagerly picked up the tray and delivered the food. I watched her with some concern, but she smiled warmly as she said, "Sorry for the wait," to the customers. She seemed like a completely different person from the last time I saw her. She even greeted the next customers with a cheerful welcome and guided them to the table where she had been sitting earlier. She worked swiftly and efficiently, spotting customers who were about to leave and calling out, "Raymond, the bill, please," while also clearing empty dishes and taking orders. Thanks to her, I was able to focus on cooking more than usual. Even some of the regulars commented, "The food was especially good today." After all the customers had left, I hung the closed sign on the door and went back inside. I sat down across from Katherine, who was waiting for me. She bowed deeply, placing her hands on the floor. "I'm so sorry. After you saved me, I accused you of being a pervert and a creep." I blinked in surprise as she placed a white pen on the table in front of me. It was the pen Andrew had said he'd return. This is actually a voice recorder. I had it turned on that day, hoping to record your words. Your childhood friend Andrew returned it to me, along with a note that said, "Listen carefully to what's recorded." That's how I realized you were trying to save me. Katherine raised her head, her face serious. Of course, I've dropped the charges. Also, in Andrew's note, he mentioned that you plan to close this restaurant. That's why I came here today. I apologize for showing up without notice. She bowed again, then glanced around the restaurant. The customers who were here today. They all seemed to be regulars, right? They looked so happy, enjoying your food. Just watching them made me feel full. This restaurant is truly loved. Yeah, thanks to them. When I replied, her expression turned serious. If I was the reason for the restaurant closing, you don't have to worry anymore. I won't do anything to damage your restaurant's reputation from now on. So, it's fine. I was planning to close the restaurant anyway, even before what happened. I cut her off, and her brows furrowed in sadness. When you first came here, you saw Cedar Inn and me at a low point. The only reason people are coming now is because they know it's their last chance. That's not true. Katherine leaned forward, bringing her face close to mine. I caught a soft scent of violets, possibly from her perfume, and unexpectedly felt a sweet ache in my chest. It's such a waste. This place is loved so much. Please, let me do a proper interview. I'll make sure everyone knows how great this restaurant is." Seeing the surprised look on my face, she blushed and quickly pulled back. I'll make an appointment this time," she added weakly, and I couldn't help but laugh. Her embarrassment only made her blush more deeply. "And please, let me help with the restaurant, too. I want to experience working here myself so I can understand what makes Cedar Inn so special. That way, I can write a really great article." That's a bit much, don't you think?" "No. Please, let me do at least this much." Her words were filled with determination. With a sigh, I looked her in the eye. "Honestly, we could use the help. I've been so busy, I could use a hand. And you did a great job today. So, sure, let's see what you've got." "Thank you. I'll do my best." Her sparkling eyes made her look adorable, and I couldn't help but feel my heart skip a beat. The next morning, Katherine arrived at Cedar Inn bright and early. The day before, she had asked if she could join me on my morning trip to the market. "I won't be a bother," she had said. "I'd just like to take some photos and record some audio for the article." Since she asked in advance, I agreed, and she had sighed in relief. "Good morning." Even though it was still 7 a.m., Katherine greeted me with a beaming smile that rivaled the brightness of the morning sun. Today, she was wearing the same white suit as when we first met. It must be her work attire. We headed to the market, browsing through the fish and vegetables. I picked out the items I needed, occasionally haggling over prices. Meanwhile, Katherine introduced herself to each vendor, handing out her business card and asking permission to take photos and record audio. If anyone declined, she respected their wishes and quietly observed as I made my purchases. However, since Katherine was quite beautiful, most of the vendors, especially the men, granted her permission with little hesitation. Whether she noticed this or not, she would flash a bright, innocent smile and thank them whenever they agreed. On the way back, Katherine asked me various questions. "Do you have any special criteria when selecting ingredients?" "Not really. I just focus on freshness, and I try to use seasonal ingredients whenever possible. They taste great and are packed with nutrients." Speaking of seasonal dishes, the main course for the A set has changed, hasn't it? It's now oyster Rockefeller. You noticed? I stopped in surprise. But with Katherine urging me on, I started walking again. The seasonal set itself has been around for generations, but I changed the main dish when I became head chef. I researched dishes that would appeal to younger customers, thinking it would bring in more business. It was only after I decided to close the restaurant that I realized I had been neglecting my loyal regulars. So, I went back to the old menu. I see. Yeah, I think the current menu is better. Honestly, when I first came, I was a bit taken aback to see something so different from what I expected from a historic restaurant dating back to the 1800s. Her words stung a little, and I felt a bit miffed. But Katherine didn't seem to notice. "Did you mean to say that without thinking?" Katherine looked at me, confused. Then, her face suddenly turned pale. "Oh no! Did I offend you? I'm so sorry." From the moment we met, I had a faint suspicion, and now I was certain Katherine didn't seem to have any ill intentions behind her words or actions. I've always been told by my father to be more mindful of others because I often offend people without meaning to. Looking back, I never really listened to him, did I? "I regret that now," Katherine said, her shoulders drooping dejectedly. Seeing her so downcast stirred a sense of sympathy within me. My dad used to tell me the same thing, warned me about my temper.
So if I got annoyed at your comment earlier,
Maybe a quarter of that's just my bad personality. Only a quarter? Hey, I listened to my dad.
I got annoyed, but I didn't lose my temper. My light-hearted remark seemed to lift her spirits, and she let out a soft giggle.
Raymond, you're amazing.
Not only for running such a fine restaurant on your own, but for your dedication and seriousness about cooking.
You're just as impressive as cedar in itself.
Her eyes sparkled as she looked up at me. Being stared at by such beautiful eyes made my heart race. It really would be such a waste for a place like this to close. We need to spread the word about how wonderful both you and Cedarin are. She struck a determined pose, bending her elbows and clenching her fists with enthusiasm. During the prep work after the market run, Katherine continued her coverage, snapping photos and occasionally asking me questions. When it was time to open for lunch, she took off her suit jacket, put on the apron I had prepared, and got to work serving customers. Like a delicate white violet, she moved gracefully around the restaurant, and the customers couldn't help but smile warmly as they watched her.
Raymond, when did you get yourself such a nice girlfriend?
One of the regulars joked when I was at the register.
Katherine had suggested that I handle the payments because customers probably want to talk to you when it comes to paying the bill.
I denied the comment, blushing, but the regular only laughed.
Come on now, don't be shy.
The dinner service passed in much the same way, and soon it was time to close the shop. Once the restaurant had emptied, Katherine sat down in one of the chairs and let out a deep breath.
Good job today. I offered Katherine a cup of warm coffee and a scone. Katherine beamed at me and said, "Thank you."
Her smile had a soothing effect, slowly easing away the day's fatigue.
By the way, I noticed Killian didn't come with you this time. He didn't seem like just a co-worker. Is he your boyfriend or something?
I remembered the way he looked at Katherine with that tender gaze, and a pang of jealousy stung my chest.
But curiosity got the better of me, so I asked her about it.
She slowly chewed the scone, making sure to swallow it completely. After sipping her coffee and letting out a soft breath, she gave a small, somewhat lonely smile.
Killian is my fiancé. But the one he truly loves is my father. He's engaged to me because my father wanted it.
Killian wants to be my father's right-hand man, and he accepted my father's suggestion to marry me. She explained the situation to me.
Killian grew up in an orphanage due to family circumstances.
Katherine's father provided significant financial support to the orphanage and visited weekly, showering the children with affection. Having never received love from his own parents and starved for affection, Killian came to admire Katherine's father. Determined to work for him and become his right-hand man, Killian studied hard, graduated from a prestigious university, and joined Daylight Press. My father treated Killian like a son, which is why he wanted us to marry.
To be honest, I don't really love Killian. But every man who's ever shown interest in me has only cared about my money. They all acted like they adored me. But they were just trying to gain favor with the CEO's daughter. Deep down, I've always wanted to marry someone I could genuinely love. Someone who sees me as Katherine and not as the CEO's daughter. But since I've never met anyone like that, I figured Killian was the best option since at least he's not after my money.
Katherine rested her chin on her hand, staring off into the distance. My dream was to become a writer, so I got into Daylight Press through my father's connections. I was excited at first, but soon, everyone started treating me differently because I was the CEO's daughter. When I became editor-in-chief, some of my peers made snide comments like,
Must be nice to get a good position thanks to your connections. After a while, I stopped caring about my job or even about relationships. I got lazy. I didn't even bother making appointments for interviews because I knew no one would question me if they knew who my father was.
Still resting her chin on her hand, Katherine fixed her gaze on me. My heart raced, and I found myself unable to look away from her.
It's been a long time since someone scolded me like that. It was embarrassing, but it made me happy. You didn't treat me like a CEO's daughter, you treated me like a person. That's why I've decided not to give up. I'm going to do my best, both in work and in love. Katherine looked at me and smiled softly.
That smile felt like a gentle spring breeze, warming my heart. Thanks to Katherine's close coverage, Cedar Inn started seeing not only regulars but also new customers. As a result, we became busier and busier. The decision to close the restaurant was canceled, thanks to overwhelming support from our customers. The joy on the faces of the regulars when I told them the news, and the way Katherine proudly said, "It's all thanks to my article," still warms my heart whenever I think about it. I shot a sharp look at Andrew, who was lounging in the seating area, watching me rush around.
"Andrew, give me a hand. You helped me out last time, didn't you? Hey, I'm a customer right now. Besides, you've already got help." He nodded toward the entrance just as the door slid open and Katherine walked in. "Good evening. Sorry I'm late. I'll start helping right away." She flashed a bright smile, and from somewhere, a playful shout came, "Hey, finally! We've been waiting, Katherine." Katherine waved them off casually with, yeah, just wait a bit," and then headed into the kitchen, washed her hands, and put on an apron. "What should I do first?" "Take the C set to table 5. "Got it."
Katherine picked up the tray with the main dish, then suddenly stopped and turned back to me, saying, "Oh, by the way, I broke off my engagement with Killian."
Aha! Wait, what?
The unexpected news nearly made me drop the knife I was holding.
Hey, don't spring stuff like that on me. I'm handling sharp knives here. Oops, sorry, she said with a playful wink. That kind of teasing used to annoy me, but now that I knew her better, I couldn't help but find it a little cute. Killian lied, you know? He told my dad he was the one who saved me. So, I called him out on it. It was kind of sad, but apparently, he's been lying like that ever since he was in the orphanage, trying to impress the people he wanted to like him. Anyway, my dad only called off the engagement. He didn't completely cut ties with Killian, so don't worry. Not that I'm worried. Your engagement and breakup don't really concern me. Oh, I see.
Katherine's face fell, and I realized I had said the wrong thing.
But just then, a customer called out, "Hey, where's our food?" "I'll be right there." Katherine cheerfully responded and quickly went off to deliver the C set.
As I bit my lip, planning to apologize when she returned, Katherine came back right away.
"Katherine, about earlier,
As I fumbled for the right words to apologize, Katherine came up to me, stepping closer with small, quick steps.
"Could you put the knife down for a second?"
Since she asked, and I was already feeling a bit guilty about earlier, I decided to do as she said.
Luckily, there were no orders at the moment, so there was no rush. "I want to work here. Is that okay?"
"I'll make a proper appointment and even bring a resume if you want."
"Work here? But what about your writing? Isn't that your dream?" "I'll be a freelance writer. That way, I can still write and work here." "Got it." Well, forget the resume and interview, I already know you well enough.
You're more than welcome.
Really? You mean it?
For some reason, she blushed as she leaned in closer, and feeling a bit overwhelmed, I nodded, saying, yeah. Then she smiled slyly. Okay then, from today, I'll be working here as your wife.
Let's do our best, Raymond. Wait, wife. It's too late to take it back now. I've got proof.
She pulled the white pen out of her pocket and gave it a little wave in front of my eyes.
Ever since Katherine became my wife, Cedarin has been thriving. Hey, Raymond. Did you see the latest review on Eats Review? Cedarin got a 5-star rating. Andrew beamed as he showed me and Katherine his phone.
I thought it would be stuffy because it's a historic place, but it was the opposite. The staff and regulars were incredibly friendly,
even to new customers.
Plus, the female staff member is gorgeous.
The seasonal menu is a must-try. I'll come back every time it changes. So glad I visited.
Wow, it's a complete turnaround from when Katherine first came around.
Well, it's all thanks to me.
Katherine puffed out her chest proudly as Andrew chuckled at the change in fortunes. Don't let it get to your head, I teased, and she smiled sheepishly, her confidence softening.
Katherine's reckless comment had once pushed the restaurant to the brink of closing.
But her reflection and efforts helped rebuild it into a place that customers now love even more. I also learned, through this experience, to reappreciate the loyal regulars who had always supported Cedarin. From now on, I'll be mindful of my words and continue to cook with care, for all the important people around me. With that thought freshly etched into my heart, I moved forward.